IB Nation, what's going on? It's the Notre Dame Recruiting Hour here on Irish Breakdown Podcast. I'm Ryan Roberts, Director of Recruiting here, of course, at IB Nation, joined by Mr. Sean Davis, Recruiting Analyst here at irishbreakdown.com, as well as the co-host of the Lucky Lefty Podcast, which you can find on the CFB Nation YouTube channel, CFB Nation channel. You can also YouTube Lucky Lefty Podcast, and that'll pop up for you. Him and former Notre Dame quarterback Malik Zaire bringing the truth to the Notre Dame landscape. As what do you say, Sean? You say we talk it different. What's your saying, man?
We're lefties, so we spin it different.
We spin it different. That was it. I messed up your little mantra there already. But it's Sean, this is gonna be a fun show though, man. We got, of course, a lot of recruiting talk to get to.
Yeah.
We are now a week removed from the dead period officially lifting. So now we're in a quiet period right now from the recruiting side of things, which means a lot of visits are going to start to happen. We had 2 visitors over the weekend for Notre Dame, and we'll see more and more that visitor list at boards.irishbreakdown.com is going to be added to. So make sure you go to boards.irishbreakdown.com and sign up, because a part of the intel from the team side, from the recruiting side, we also have that visitor list, which will be constantly updated as we get more and more information on when 2024, 2025, and probably even 2026 recruits eventually get to campus to visit the University of Notre Dame. So make sure to sign up there. So how this show is going to work today, Sean, is the first section is going to be about some recruiting updates, man. We'll talk about some visitors that happened this weekend. We'll talk about some visits in the future, some things you need to know from the Notre Dame recruiting side, because this is what you're here for, right? But one other thing that we wanted to talk about today, which I think is a fun topic for the second segment of the day, is for people that don't follow me on Twitter at Rise and Draft, or don't follow, just my work with Irish Breakdown. My roots originated from the NFL draft side of the business, right? Working with agents, doing consulting, doing NFL draft content, all that great stuff. So I was down this past week and into Saturday at the 2023 NFL Scouting Combine. Of course, there were 4 Notre Dame players that were on tap there in Indianapolis to showcase themselves against some other great players in hopes of, raising their draft stock leading up till April. Of course, Isaiah Foskey, Michael Mayer, Brandon Joseph, and Jared Patterson were all there. So we're going to do a quick recap in segment 2 of how each one of these players fared during their week in Indianapolis. And me and Sean thought this would be a fun idea to give you guys a little sneak peek into some of the players that might be able to be at the 2024 NFL Scouting Combine for the Notre Dame side of things, and how we expect that they would perform there from a testing perspective. So we're going to give you that glimpse. We're also going to hit a mailbag at the end. But like I said, man, Sean, it is a crazy world right now, man. We're fresh in the offseason. We have another coaching hire that we expect to happen probably over the next couple days. Marty Biaggi, who was the former special teams coordinator at Ole Miss, is the guy that is the heavy favorite for Notre Dame. He is visiting today, and it is a similar situation to the Joe Rudolph stuff from last 2 weeks ago, I guess now, where if the visit goes well, we expect, as far as the interview checks out, that he most likely will be the new special teams coordinator at Notre Dame, right, in the near future. So nothing has been formally offered. It hasn't been accepted. Obviously, you can't accept something if an offer is not on the table, but that's where things are trending, obviously, right? So that's big news on top of all the recruiting world, man. Sean, my wheels are spinning a little bit, man, because I'm just like, there is so much stuff to talk about today, man. A lot of stuff.
Man, let's get to it. I can't wait.
Yeah, man.
Pretty good weekend. How was your weekend, bro?
It was really good, man, because I left on Tuesday morning to go into Indianapolis. I got back on Saturday afternoon. Will not lie, Sean, I was missing the family, man. I was really missing the family. So I got back early enough on Saturday so I could hang out with Juliet and my wife Caitlin for a while. And then, Sunday was kind of catch-up mode on the recruiting side of things, get some things ready for obviously the work week and all that great stuff, man. But it was good. It was good. How was your week? You were chilling?
Man, chill. Of course, Sundays for us, family, church. So that's always great. Had some great NBA viewing yesterday. I did check out Chris Rock's special on Saturday night, laughed a little bit. So yeah, just, man, spent some incredible time with the family and did some things. It was a great weekend. And then, of course, I got to watch the combine. So,
yes,
watched our Notre Dame guys go out there and compete. So,
yeah, man. And we'll
We only had 3 people there, as far as I'm concerned. But that's another.
Well, we'll talk about all that stuff, man, the second segment, Sean. But it's a great kind of transition to some of the recent news, Sean. Because it is one of the things. We're talking about how our weekends were and all the busyness and everything, right? Well, Notre Dame recruiting department was very busy this past weekend. Like we said, there's going to be a lot of visits that are going to be starting to be set up, throughout the next couple of months here in the spring and summer. But there were 2 visitors to Notre Dame just this past weekend, man, and a couple of guys, one that has an offer, one that does not. So let's start here with just a couple of the recent visits, and then we'll talk about some players that have either changed a visit for Notre Dame or also have scheduled a visit for Notre Dame, one in particular that is a really big one. So I want to start us out by talking about Cameron Clark, who is, and sorry, correction real quick. So the player, and I have an update on him later, probably later today, most likely, a player that visited that did not have a Notre Dame offer before the visit and left the visit with an offer. So both players that led to Notre Dame this weekend do currently hold Notre Dame offers. So my apologies for that little retraction there. So Medina, Tennessee, South Gibson pass rusher, Sean, Cameron Clark, who I think we talked about a little bit a few weeks ago because he's been pretty fresh to the Notre Dame board. He's only been on the recruiting radar. Well, he's been on the radar for a little while, but he's only been on the board for Notre Dame with an offer for, a few weeks now. 6'3", 230-pound pass rusher, very productive two-way player for South Gibson. He plays tight end, plays defensive end. I think he had 80 tackles last year, 8 sacks, had another 3 touchdown catches on the offensive side of the football. He visited this past weekend and visited Notre Dame for the first time ever, Sean. And this was I would think the best phrase to kind of phrase this one would be needle moving, I guess, is an opportunity here. We've talked a lot about the defensive line recruiting in 2024 for Notre Dame and how it's a little jumbled right now. There's definitely talented players on the board, but who are they in with the best? Who are some guys that they're going to make moves with? Are we trusting that they're going to be able to close on some of the top players on the board? There's a lot of question marks for defensive line recruiting. By all indication, man, Cameron Clark had a great visit to Notre Dame. We know he's a player that Notre Dame is very intrigued by. I wouldn't say he's at the top of the list for Notre Dame, but certainly there's some traits to work with. And he talked a lot about, getting to sit down, and he spent all of his time basically with Al Golden, Al Washington, and Matt Bayless. Because I think a big part of this meeting, this visit for Cameron Clark, was to see what the body looks like, right? To see what the arm length is, to see what Matt Bayless thinks as far as can this kid develop, how much can this kid develop, how much weight can he hold, what is the ultimate long-term outlook for a guy like Cameron Clark. Sounds like a lot of boxes got checked. And it sounds like for me, and I have a piece on Cameron Clark at irishbreakdown.com if you want to go take a look there. But he spoke volumes of Coach Washington, spoke a lot about just just being on campus and, the cleanness and the prestige that you feel being on campus at Notre Dame. So I think for me, Sean, it really did move some needles with Tennessee pass rusher Cameron Clark. It'll be interesting for me to see now what's the next step. How firm are they on, pushing for Cameron? And obviously his offer list, I think he's up to like 19 offers now. His offer list is bolstering as we're talking here, right? There's some schools that are really taking a long look at Clark, but I think Notre Dame did a really nice initial first visit here to sell their vision potentially for Cameron Clark.
It's not shocking, right? Everything that you put in the story is spot on, right? That's what we expect. We expect kids to love the campus because the campus has an aura about it. You walk it, even if you don't understand the totality of the history. It is different, right? And then every mom loves Notre Dame. They love what Notre Dame has to offer. But this young man, I think the state of Tennessee has an opportunity from a recruiting standpoint to give Notre Dame 2 dynamic players on defense at 2 important positions, one being a defensive back and one being a pass rusher. And in today's modern football, you need those 2 positions at a premium to be able to have an elite defense. And Cameron Clark would fit that bill. And I'm wondering, are we sensing a trend, right? Because the pass rushers that Notre Dame seems to be targeting are all pass rushers that might have to sit down and have that conversation with Matt Balis to see, okay, you might be on the smaller side now, but where can we get you to? Like, how can we build your body instead of those ready to go Keon Keeley types that are, you're going to be going up against the top schools and battling for those guys. It's not that Notre Dame is shying away from going after those guys, but they're really tapping into guys that have great traits as a pass rusher, but just might be a little bit on the smaller side.
Yeah. And I mean, I parlay it, Sean, like these school visits on that side of it is almost like the NFL scouting combine in that, right? Like you want that official measurement. You want to see what the body type looks like. Like it's archaic scouting, side of scouting, but it does matter, right? Like this stuff does matter. And I mean, for Clark, he's listed anywhere between 6'4", 6'5" on recruiting services, 220, 225. We checked in at 6'3", right around 230 pounds. So a little bit shorter than we anticipated, but a little heavier than we anticipated as well. It was 230 pounds. And I believe he had 32.5-inch arms or maybe slightly longer. So he's not the longest dude in the world, but I mean, really impressive athlete, obviously. And again, we're not sitting here and saying that Notre Dame is going to push for Cameron Clark and he's their guy, but he's certainly a player that they wanted to get in person to see what the development path could be for Cameron Clark. So an interesting football player, to say the least. Very interesting player.
I like him. I love his film. Like you said, we went over his film before. And you tap in, and I'm just very interested in seeing. It's good. I'll be flat out honest with you. It's good to hear glowing remarks from young men about Al Washington and Al Gold. Right? You love hearing that, right? The last time we heard that actually was Brandon Davis Swain.
Sure.
Talked glowingly about Al Washington. Unfortunately, he's decommitted from the class. But to hear that, it's like, man, that makes you feel good because I think most Irish fans have been sitting back and taking a wait-and-see approach when it comes to Al Washington 1 year down the line after he took the job as defensive line coach to see how he can build on his defensive line recruiting. And he has some big ones to get. He has some big ones that he cannot lose, flat out.
Sean, can I say this too? Because we need to see the end results, obviously, because that's what matters most. But I will say this. It's slightly encouraging thing is I am hearing Al Golden and Al Washington's name a lot more over the last few weeks. So, hopefully it's a step in the right direction, man. Yeah. I don't know. But ultimately, you want to hear their names a little bit more, which is a good thing. We also had, I just want to hit on this one real quick. Nathan Milton just said, formerly Milton fan, said, is that Brian chatting for IB? Yes, it was Brian. That wasn't me. So if anybody's meant anything that was said in here, it wasn't me, all right? All right. I saw my name get thrown out there. I'm like, I didn't say anything, man. I'm just doing a show right now. But yeah, interesting player though, Sean. I would say this too. Another intriguing player that came into a visit this weekend was a kind of a one that we didn't know anything about. He hadn't announced that he was visiting Notre Dame. We hadn't gotten too much insight until after the visit. And I had a nice opportunity to sit down with him last night. That is Warner Robins, Georgia, high school athletes. Isaiah Canyon. Sean, I didn't know anything about this kid. And again, we have that immediacy reaction where we say, the kid's not ranked on any recruiting platform. He isn't. An interesting player, though, because you put on his film, he's playing wide receiver. He's playing quarterback. He's got good numbers on both of those areas, by the way. He's playing cornerback as well. So he's playing all over the place. Someone compared him a little bit to Brandon Hillman, and I kind of get it because Isaiah Canyon is, I think, an underrated player from a ranking perspective because he is talented. I ask anybody to just go watch the film and notice that he is talented, right? But he's a guy that just hasn't played one spot enough, right? Like he gets moved everywhere because he's an athlete. He's a very good athlete. Notre Dame offers him as a wide receiver. They come into this weekend, and if Warner Robins sounds familiar to anyone, it's because of this, Sean. We've talked about this before. Chancey Stuckey is from Warner Robins, Georgia. He went to Northside High School, so not Warner Robins High School, but he has a connection, a deep reputation in Warner Robins, Georgia. Well, Isaiah Canyon came this weekend, and Notre Dame, I think, verified everything that they liked on film with the size and all that type of stuff. Because he's listed at 6'3", 190, and obviously he checked a lot of boxes. He left this visit with Notre Dame with an offer, official offer from the University of Notre Dame. I don't know how much you've gotten to see him yet, Sean, but he's a very intriguing player. Again, we need to see where his place is in with this class, with the priority list, all that great stuff, because there's a lot of really talented wide receivers on the list for Notre Dame, but it's hard not to get a little excited about some things that you see on film, and an interesting football player that left Notre Dame this weekend with an offer.
I remember when you mentioned his name this weekend about the visit, it was on the board. I immediately jumped and looked at his film. I actually like him as a cornerback too, just from an athletic standpoint, right? I'm like, yo, this dude is a really good deep threat. That's good talent in the state of Georgia. So when you see a young man running by guys with ease and getting separation in the state of Georgia, that's pretty good speed. And so that's the one thing that stood out to me. It's like, okay, he is definitely their team's deep threat because that's the way they're using him. And I expect them to get better and stronger. But I'm intrigued by his athleticism. I really am. You know, you watch his film, you're not about to see a bunch of different routes. Like you said, he hasn't played a lot.
He's a vertically oriented route runner right now, for sure. Yeah,
absolutely. So, but explosive in that. And that's what you want to see from the film that he has out right now. And it's going to be interesting to see if he locks in one particular area and kind of develops and becomes a little bit more nuanced, whether it's the defensive side of the ball or offensive side of the ball.
And Sean, I was writing an article about Isaiah Caddian this morning, and this is it's so weird that we are like a calendar year with Chancey Stuckey, right? And before that, he had only been a position coach for 1 year on college. But I am sitting here and I'm like, you know what? If Chancey likes him, I'm going to give him a shot, and I'm not going to talk too much. Like, that's where we are.
You're giving him the Mike Mickens love?
I mean, almost. I mean, obviously, Mickens has done it a lot longer, so he has a little bit even longer of a leash as far as evaluations go. But I mean, Chancey's identified some really talented players. I mean, Quasi Gilmer was another guy that he's identified in this cycle already, who I think is a very talented player. Micah Gilbert's one that I think the full staff obviously had a little bit of insight on that one, the North Carolina wide receiver. But yeah, man, it's a very interesting football player. I know Brian just put in the chat that he measured in at the Atlanta Under Armour camp at 6'3.5", 191 pounds. I ran a 4.51 in the 40-yard dash for junior in high school, man. That's moving. That's moving. So he's a very talented football player. We'll see, what the next step is with Notre Dame. But I'll say this. If Notre Dame does make a strong push for him, I do think that Notre Dame will be a tough team to beat in the end. I think that they'll have some power there, I think, right? Because I think it's the relationship with Chancey Stuckey already. I think it's Chancey Stuckey being from Warner Robins. Like, that means a lot, right? It does mean a lot. People know him around those parts. So I think that they would have a very good chance with a guy like Isaiah Caddian if they did push. So we'll see what happens with it. But left the week with weekend with an offer, and congratulations to Isaiah. It seemed like a really nice young man from my interview with him, obviously. And interesting player to keep an eye out for Notre Dame.
If I'm not mistaken, Warner Robins is the home of the Fabulous Freebirds as well. I'm sorry, that's taking my wrestling roots back a little bit. But I think Michael P.S. Hayes, Terry Gordy, and the crew, I think they were from Warner Robins down there.
Yeah, it might be. I'll let your knowledge on that.
Just side. watch the chat. The chat's gonna fill up with people talking about it. The wrestling fans, the IB Nation, but no, it's definitely a football factor without question. Man.
Dude, I love these chats because they get so – I know they get so off tangent sometimes, man, but I find it really funny because someone just asked about my glasses. So I'm wearing new glasses today. They're not new glasses, though. They're a pair I've had for a long time. They're like my spare glasses. My daughter decided to bend the arm yesterday, Sean, and that was not going to work out too well. So, yeah, new glasses today, man. New glasses today. But back on the regular train of thought here, though, Sean. Back on topic here. Two players that we wanted to talk about that have already set visits to Notre Dame. One is a change that I want to talk about for a second, and that is Reading, Pennsylvania, Wyoming offensive lineman Caleb Brewer, who we've talked a lot about on this show. He has rescheduled his visit. Originally, he was supposed to come to Notre Dame for the first time, by the way, on April 1st. He's going to be coming on March 31st instead, the day before, because his family has decided they're going to kind of do like that they're going to kind of do that Midwest swing a little bit, Sean. So they'll be on April 1st. They'll be at Michigan as well. So they're going to go Notre Dame to Michigan and do all that type of stuff. So after talking again with Caleb, after he filled me in on kind of the rescheduling stuff, still feel really good about that one, Sean. I really do. Again, it's his first time visiting Notre Dame on March 31st. Will be his first time ever, him and his family. It also needs to be said that there's going to be an interesting moments coming up soon here when Joe Rudolph starts really heavily recruiting for Notre Dame, when everything's officially official, when he's allowed to do all that type of stuff. And someone just said it's April Fool's for Michigan. Wouldn't it be fantastic if we just commit to Notre Dame? Was like, I'm not thinking that trip Michigan first. But obviously we don't expect that to happen. That the process is going to play out a lot longer than that. So, but Sean, he needs to speak with Joe Rudolph, see what the meshing is there, that relationship continue to grow, all that great stuff, which would be important. But I still like where Notre Dame sits. Today, I've been consistent about this for a few weeks. I feel as strong as I have after my conversation with them. I think that this is a Notre Dame-Penn State battle. That's what I believe. I believe that those two teams will be in the finals lists till the end. Michigan, I will applaud Michigan for a second. Not that we do that much on this show, but Michigan's doing a really good job in that recruitment. Really good job. It's kind of reminiscent to the Charles Jagasaw recruitment last year, Sean, where you're like, oh, Michigan's actually, they're putting in a little work here. They're doing their best. They're getting in it a little bit. That's kind of how I feel with Caleb Brewer. I think Michigan's trending in a good direction, but I think that Notre Dame and Penn State were just a little too far ahead at this point. So we'll see. We'll see what it obviously ends up with. But
that's a familiar trip, right? That's a familiar trip, for people that come to the Midwest. Hit Michigan and Notre Dame in the same day. Like you said, Charles Jagasaw did it a couple of times. Some other recruits that Notre Dame targeted in the 23 cycle did that cycle a couple of times, or both of those trips in one weekend. So, I don't mind that. Push us up, come to us first, and then, go see that other school.
Yeah, I think it's good to pop this up too, Sean, because to your point, and I think it's a good talking point, Stephen Doty just said, is this visit going to be an unofficial? What can be involved? How do those normally work? Just some underclassmen giving a tour, etc. So I think it's working off what you just said, though, Sean. Yeah, they're getting a visit before Notre Dame. Notre Dame, Michigan technically, Notre Dame gets the visit before Notre Dame. I guess technically, if you want to look at it this way, Notre Dame gets the final crack, if that is the final crack, but this is an unofficial visit to your question, right, Stephen. This is an unofficial visit, which means Caleb Brewer still has 5 official visits that he can take. And if it does trend all the way towards the official visits being a differentiator, I would expect Notre Dame to be one of the final visits that he does take. So, and
then the unofficials usually happen right now.
Yeah.
A lot of kids save their officials for the fall and game weekends.
So, some in the summer and then onto the fall. Yeah.
And that gives you, usually the earlier the unofficial, the earlier the decision.
Yes.
From a kid. So if you get a kid that's taking an early or late March, early April unofficial, more than likely their decision is going to come sometime during the summer.
Yep.
Right. And you have kids taking unofficials during the summer. They're going to go into the fall or either make a decision right before the start of the season. So,
and it usually, to your point, Sean, is every kid's different. Some kids want to take all 5 officials. Some of them want to take a couple. Some of them are only going to take one official to the school that they commit to. That's, it really depends on what who the kid is. So I don't know if Caleb Brewer is going to be the let's take all 5 officials guy. I don't know if he's going to take a couple. I don't know if he's going to take one. We'll see. We'll see how the visit with Notre Dame goes, and then I'll kind of have a better gauge for that. All I know is Notre Dame's in a good spot, in my opinion. I think they have a chance to, and Caleb is very excited to see Notre Dame. We'll just leave it at that, right? He is very excited. I was bummed, though, Sean, because we were talking about his wrestling background. I was bummed. He broke his wrist, and he had to miss the final few weeks of the season, man. I was really bummed because he's a top 5 heavyweight in the state of Pennsylvania, man. He was chasing a state championship. I think he was 24-2 when he broke his wrist or something. I was bummed to hear that he got hurt.
definitely had to be heartbreaking for the young man. And but Pennsylvania is definitely highly competitive when it comes to wrestling. Like it's right there. Iowa and Pennsylvania are really neck and neck. State of Illinois is competitive, as we know with Charles Jackensaw, even though he was in a lower class
Yeah.
because of the school he went to. But you get highly competitive when you start talking about the state of Pennsylvania, which bodes well, right? You watch his film and you're like, yeah, he's probably pretty good on the mat.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Like he is definitely a wrestler. He's definitely a football player with a deep wrestling background. Like there's no doubt about that. A couple differences to Steven's question, real quick, Sean. So unofficial is on the family's dime, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the travel is up to them, the stay is up to them, all that great stuff. Official, obviously, the school's paying for everything, so they pay for travel, they pay for stay, they pay for food, they take care of you. Unofficials are usually also touring athletic facilities and doing just a general tour. Officials are more, we're going to take you into the school. You're going to talk to academic advisors. You're going to see the classrooms. You're going to see the dorms, like more heavy duty as far as the I guess the in-depth nature of those visits. And then obviously usually unofficial visits are only like a 1-day visit. Official visits are usually a weekend, usually multiple days, that type of stuff. So that's usually the biggest differences between the visit schedules.
That's why you see most people save theirs for the fall.
Yep.
And game days.
Yep, that's exactly. Yeah, and they want that full weekend experience of a game day too, right? Like they want to be around the fans and get their food taken care of, all that great stuff. So it's a really fun time. Last guy, Sean, I was able to confirm this Saturday, I forget, whenever. It was up on the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com, and I also had the little more in-depth piece this morning about it. Notre Dame will be receiving a visit from a pretty talented player. His name's Jaden Riddell. He is out of Raymore, Missouri, Peculiar High School, rated by, I believe, 247 Sports as the number 1 tight end in the class. He's a top 100 recruit by multiple platforms. He will be visiting Notre Dame on March 25th, so later this month, Sean. This is a big one for Notre Dame. It's a big one for Notre Dame. He was just at Alabama this past weekend. He's visiting Notre Dame. He's visiting LSU, visiting Tennessee. He's got a few already set up. Notre Dame, I know, from our sources, Notre Dame feels pretty good about where they are with Jaden Riddell, but there's going to be a lot of suitors. There's going to be a lot of interest. This is a chance for Notre Dame in his first visit to campus to knock this one out of the park, Sean. Like, they have their chance to put their pitch out there, to impress him, impress his family, and hopefully make some big waves, because I think they feel good about it. But like this visit is either going to move the needle to the utmost degree, or it's going to move the needle a little bit, but not quite enough where you're going to be able to outlast some of the powers that are recruiting this type of kid.
Look, we watched this film, and I was just loving the fact that they didn't even attach him. Like, you know what? He's probably the best receiver on our team, even though he's our tight end. And you talking about running deep routes, getting behind guys. I see why he's ranked number 1. And you looked at those rankings you talked about. You see Carter Nelson coming in somewhere around 3, 4 in that range. And, they already have Jack Larson in the class. And we've toyed with, sitting down amongst the coaches and begging to take 3 if you can, if you have the opportunity to get Carter Nelson and Jaden Riddell. But no, for him to set a visit and once again, continue the pipeline. This is why planting the flag is so vitally important. I would venture to say the offer and the connection that Chancey Stuckey has in order to go ahead and make that offer this weekend is an opportunity for Notre Dame to plant a flag in the state of Georgia. You have to find a way to do it at some point. And to be able to do it in Warner Robins and Notre Dame once again, to keep the flow from the state of Missouri, St. Louis area, coming to Notre Dame, Jaden Riddell would be absolutely amazing. Can't wait for him to get in. Hopefully be able to watch a practice. It's tight end you. It's tight end you.
It should be an easy sell, man. And then your tight end coach, who did a great job with Michael Mayer, is now the offensive coordinator.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It should be a decent sell. It really should. We'll see, obviously, what if it moves the needle with a guy like Jaden Riddell. But I mean, Sean, I think you said it perfectly, and I just want to reiterate this again. Missouri right now, especially in the St. Louis area, is putting out a lot of really good football players, a lot of really good athletes, especially. Notre Dame needs to put a little fence around Missouri because there's no in-state power. Like if it's Notre Dame versus the Missouri Tigers, Notre Dame better win that one 100 out of 100. Like you better not lose a player to the University of Missouri. All due respect to Missouri, and it's still a Midwestern school, right? Like it's still a Midwestern state. You can extend. I mean, it's like 5 hours away. So Notre Dame needs to be able to extend and win in the state there. And I think Georgia is another good one for you that you said, Sean. I feel like we always talk about like the big three is like Florida, California, Texas, right? But Georgia needs to be in that conversation, man. They put out some dudes, brother. Like some absolute dudes, man.
A ton of talent from that state. Tons of talent. I'm talking about difference-making talent. Like the fact that in the same high school season, you had Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence going at it in the same state. And they're ranked the first and second quarterbacks in the nation. It's like when you have that type of talent, you understand why Georgia can solidify itself from a recruiting standpoint, right? Because they can stay in state and probably come up with 4 or 5 stars every year.
Yeah.
Just in state. So
Sean,
planting the flag in these major cities is big for Notre Dame.
I posted this a few weeks ago. I beg anybody to look at the Georgia recruiting list from 2020. The kids coming out of the state of Georgia. That was Miles Murphy, Will Anderson year, right?
Yeah.
Sean, Josh Downs from North Carolina, the wide receiver. He was the 15th ranked player in the state, man. There was a player, I forget who it was, but there was some player ranked in the 60s that might go in the top 3 rounds of the draft this year. Like, it is just a ridiculous. I might pull this up real quick, man. I want people to understand just how wild this is.
You named 3 players that they didn't get.
Oh, yeah. I don't think Notre Dame got a player in Georgia that year.
No, I'm saying you named 3 players that Georgia didn't get.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And they still found them. That's crazy.
Ready? I'm gonna pull this up real quick. So this was the state of Georgia 2020 recruiting class. Eric Gilbert, Miles Murphy, Broderick Jones, Will Anderson, Tate Ratledge, Tank Bigsby, Philip Webb, Brian Branch, Miles Hinton, Jahmyr Gibbs, BJ Ojulari, Josh Downs, Harrison Bailey wasn't very good, Kobe Hudson, Jaquavius Marks. We got Javon Baker that went to Alabama. You have Nazir Stackhouse, who just won a 2nd national championship with the University of Georgia playing defensive tackle. Max Johnson was the 26th ranked player in the state, barely a 4-star. Kevin Swint, Dajuan Edwards, who is a running back out of Georgia, who is a really good football player himself. Rashad Torrance, who's in the draft this year, a starting safety for the University of Florida. Jared Ivey, who's a stud at Ole Miss, a defensive end. I mean, man, this, Sean, literally, 38th player in the state, Jaheim Bell, tight ends.
Wow.
Like, yeah.
So you named 5 guys that might go first round this year?
Just in the first round this year. I mean, yeah, Miles Murphy will go first round. Broderick Jones will probably go first round. Will Anderson will go first round. Brian Branch will probably go first round. Jahmyr Gibbs might go first round. BJ Ojulari might go first round. Josh Downs. That's 7 guys that might go in the first round in that one recruiting class in a single state. Yeah. Wild, man. Yeah. Wild how that 2020 Georgia group was just nutty, man. Like, it was just really nuts. It really was. It was wild.
So it's vitally important for players in a state to recognize, and the coaches to recognize, okay, a kid has gone to Notre Dame and been successful.
Yeah.
That's huge. You have to set that precedent. And you can't be fearful. And the fact that Chancey Stuckey, he comes in, what does he do? He goes back to where his experience has been in his 1-year coaching in Texas. And he mines the state of Texas. He goes back to his roots as a player and where he grew up, and he wants to plant a flag and start mining the state of Georgia. That can have long-term benefit down the road in several positions for Notre Dame. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, you just mentioned the roots in Texas. He has roots in Georgia, obviously. He grew up in Georgia. He also lived out in California a little bit, Sean. So we're talking about the Jason Robinson connection, too, in Long Beach Poly. Like, Chancey Stuckey's been around a little bit, man. He's been around a little bit. He has some roots everywhere, which is, I think, helping in the recruiting side of things, to your point. So that's the recruiting updates we have, again, Cameron Clark updated his visit this past weekend to Notre Dame. Warner Robins athlete Isaiah Canyon, who got offered by Notre Dame this weekend during his visit. It's Caleb Brewer rescheduling his visit from April 1st to March 31st, a little bit of a Midwest swing. And then Jaden Riddell setting his first visit to Notre Dame for March 25th later this month. So that's kind of the main recruiting breakdowns that we'll talk about. And yeah, man, if you all want to keep throwing some questions about recruiting in, we'll have the mailbag in the third section of the podcast. But that's going to do this one. This is a little bit of just our kind of recruiting update portion of the Notre Dame Recruiting Hour on the Irish Breakdown podcast. All right, so Sean, we are now in section 2 of the podcast, segment 2. I was down in Mobile. I was down in Indianapolis. I thought I was at the Senior Bowl for some reason, right? I was in Indianapolis for the 2023 NFL Scouting Combine. There were 4 football players that were on site in Indianapolis for Notre Dame that were there to obviously show themselves against some of the scouts, evaluators, personnel people, general managers, coaches that were on tap in Indianapolis. So, Sean, I think periodically, man, let's just work through a couple of these guys, kind of what we saw from them. Obviously it was a little bit of a mixed bag from a Notre Dame perspective, a little bit, but let's start with who I would say probably had the best workout of anybody of the Notre Dame players on site in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
That's Isaiah Foskey, defensive end, all-time leading sacker, 26 and a half sacks, 4-year player, actually technically only a 3-year player on the defensive side of the football, barely played when he was a true freshman. I know he blocked the punt when he was a true freshman, but he barely played on the defensive side of the football. Still ended the career as Notre Dame's all-time leading sacker. Sean, I mean, for me, man, I knew he was very athletic, but seeing it in person just hit a little different. Like it hit a little different, because he was also a little bigger than what he measured in at the Senior Bowl last month. He was 6'5" and an eighth, 264 pounds. So he gained a couple pounds, was a little bit taller than when he measured at the Senior Bowl, 34-inch arms. His length was actually a little bit longer than was at the Senior Bowl as well. He runs a 4.58 in the 40, a 1.66 10-yard split, which is a very good time for a defensive end as big as he is. 34-inch vert. He had a 10.5 broad jump, which is a really nice number for his size. Yeah. And he also ran a pretty good 3-cone, man. Isaiah's a little stiff on film, so I didn't expect him to be the great change of direction player.
Yeah, but say that one more time.
Say
that part. Say that part one more time.
He's a little stiff as a football player. Okay. Is that what you wanted? Yeah.
No, I just wanted to make sure that was heard. So when we continue this conversation,
yes,
we give objectivity.
Yes, yes, always objectivity, man. So he's a little stiff, but he really had a nice number in the 3-cone, and I was like, oh, that was surprising. I didn't expect him to even do either one of those tests. I didn't expect him to do the 3-cone or the short shuttle. I expected him just focused on that at the pro day, but he did a really good job showcasing the talent that he has. And I mean, Sean, the latest I was hearing was it was more in the day 2 range. I think that there were some NFL teams that still like him as a first-round potential player. But coming into the week, I think that it was more second to third round type of valuations for him. Leaving the week, I mean, because he interviewed really well as well. Like, we can't discount that, right? He interviewed well. He tested really well. I wouldn't be shocked if he snuck into the end of the first round. I wouldn't be shocked about it. But regardless, I have a hard time seeing Isaiah Foskey. And in the NFL draft world, anything can happen. But I have a tough time after the performance that he just put on, seeing Isaiah Foskey falling out of the top 64 picks. So I think first 2 rounds for sure. Could he sneak in the first round? It's very possible because you don't see guys his size that move as well as he do all the time. Like there's very few guys that have his size profile and are as athletic as Isaiah Foskey is.
I fully anticipate that a team like the Chicago Bears could end up with Isaiah Foskey, especially with Matt Eberflus and their 3-4 system that they have. I can see him standing up, coming off the edge, and in sub packages, I can see him playing the end in certain sub packages, being in 6'5", 260. So, especially with him and his pass rush being focused more, as he said, on the power game. He's more of a power rusher, in his opinion. He really doesn't have, going back to what you watched on film, that flexibility to really turn the corner and get low and go around the corner using the speed that he has. He has speed.
He does have speed.
But he's chosen to use power as his main source of his pass rush. So I'm sure coaching in the NFL can get a hold to him and give him a little bit more diversity in his pass rush and make him a little bit better. He could be a double-digit sack guy.
It's possible.
In the NFL. He can, I don't know if he can do what Hassan Reddick did this past year, but he could be a double-digit. But so a team like the Bears that is probably going to move back in the draft, pick up multiple second-round picks, would they go ahead and take a chance on Isaiah Foskey that fits what they want to do? Absolutely. Absolutely. And objectively looking at him, I would be happy with that because like you said, look, for sensible guys like us, the combine only confirms what we believe about a guy based upon the film.
Yep.
Either we don't get over like him running 4.58 is not something that we didn't expect.
It didn't shock me. I think I said like 4.62 to 4.65, like somewhere in that ballpark. I knew he was fast, man. I knew he was athletic. Like everyone did. Everyone did.
We knew that. We knew he had length. We knew, but like you said, the film shows one thing, and then when you line up what he said to the media about himself, it helped me to understand certain things that I saw on film when he was at Notre Dame, when he talked about my first approach is to power rush guys and bull rush guys. That's why you struggle with really big, long linemen because you're trying to power rush bigger guys, and that's probably not the smartest thing to do.
When you're going against the DeJuan Jones, the Paris Johnsons of the world, you need to have some variety to your pass rush because you might get them once, kind of sticking your foot in the ground and going down their chest, but it's not going to be consistent, man. Like you need some inside counters, you need some speed to, you need some counter variability to your arsenal that you have. Like you need that stuff, man. The pass rush plan, we talk about that all the time. You need that if you're Isaiah Foskey at the next level. He reminds me, Sean, of a future Baltimore Raven. Like that's who he reminds me of, man. Like he's Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith, like what's the Matt Judon, right? That was a really good player. Like those power-based players.
Yeah.
But that's my biggest frustration with Isaiah, though.
That's the same type of, because they do that, right? They go to that 4-2-5 with the two outside linebackers pass rushing, and then they'll go to the 3-4. They have two great inside linebackers now.
Yeah.
Right. So they can handle the run game, and getting him to add to the pass rush on the outside, that would definitely fit Baltimore. It would fit San Diego in a certain way. Wait a minute. San Diego just went, I think they just switched, didn't they?
As far as what defensively?
They were traditionally like 3-4.
They're still a 3-4-ish team because they had Khalil Mack this year, so they were playing, that role as well.
That role as well.
Yeah.
So the Bears. There's still some teams. Pittsburgh is also a team that loves Notre Dame players that you could look for.
Yeah, Stephon Tuitt.
TJ Watt with his injuries the last 2 years, maybe solidifying behind him on the depth chart from a pass rush standpoint. There are some teams that I think would love to come up and get him early in the second round, maybe late first.
And I would never shy away from this, Sean, and this has been consistently my opinion on Isaiah Foskey. Isaiah is incredibly talented football player, man. Like the traits are just so enticing.
Yeah.
And despite him being the all-time leading sacker at Notre Dame, I still feel like there's so much more that he could be, man. I just don't think he's nearly hit his ceiling. Like that's where I am with it, Like I think that there needs to be an emphasis on pass rush variety, pass rush plan. If there is, we'd be talking about Isaiah Foskey being an absolute steal even in the late first round. Like he is that type of talent that he could be one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. I truly believe that.
How do
baseline? He can still be a good baseline. He can still be a good player, but do you want to be more than a power-based rusher? If you are, I mean, then we're talking about really taking the next step, man. But he could be so good. He could be so good.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'll be fair to him, right? I don't know how much we lay at the feet of Mike Elston and Al Washington, that combination that he played under when it comes to developing multiple pass rushes and getting him to realize, man, I need to do a little bit more than this.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. He had the most intriguing media comments to me as far as his approach to pass rushing. I was sitting there like, wait, what? But
Sean, it frustrated me, man. It frustrated me. Some of his, and so let's start this conversation real quick. We were going to try to save these for the mailbag, but I think it's a very pertinent question to our conversation here. Jason just said, why didn't Al Washington teach him other moves, or was he not willing? Jason, I mean, from Isaiah's comments, and that's what we have to take as a grain of salt, right? Because we don't have the practice availability every single day. He credited Al Washington a lot for adding moves to his arsenal and variation and learning new things. But then to Sean's point, and this is what frustrated me about Isaiah Foskey's media availability, is he talked a lot about that he just wants to play down a guy's face all the time. He just wants to be a power-based rusher. And I'm like, okay, so it sounds like to me, and this is just by Isaiah's comments, I guess I'm speculating slightly, but like proof is in the conversation. I mean, literally there's video out there if you want to see it, where he says that Al Washington gave him tools to kind of put tools into the toolbox, right? Put tools into the arsenal. But it sounds like to me that he's more kind of just sees himself as a power-based rusher, and it's just not an emphasis on using it as much. So I think, if you ask me, which one is it more? I think it's more that Isaiah was kind of set with his plan, right? And the player that you've been. Because the one thing is, and Sean, this is the tough part too. Isaiah Foskey in 2021 had 11 sacks, right? Like he was very, very talented player, very productive player. And when you're that productive, I do think it's sometimes hard for people to kind of sit back and be like, oh man, I was really good this year, but I could be better, right? Like it's hard for people to have that moment when you're so productive and you could just do things that not a lot of people can do and get that type of production despite not being an incredibly nuanced player. So I'm not actually willing to blame Al Washington for this one. I'm not willing to blame him for this one. I do think this is more Isaiah Foskey's opinion of who he is, right? What he sees himself as. And I hope that whoever his next coach is on the NFL level can get through to him and be like, Isaiah, like, you're an incredibly talented power rusher. There's no doubt. But if you add this to the toolbox, if you add these two things, you can go from good to very good to elite. You can go to being a one of the better ones in the league. Like, I think he has that type of upside, which is, again, why he's just a little frustrating of a player to me, just a little bit.
You just opened the door for me, right?
Oh, no. I don't know what
you
that
just
means.
Opened the door for me because, the last I checked, Isaiah Foskey said and told everyone that he came back to Notre Dame to win a national championship.
He did, yeah.
But now you're talking about his pass rush being basically what he feels like he wants his pass rush to be. See that? Look, man, at some point, I'm all for a guy 3 years in recognizing like, yo, look, coach, I know how to get to the quarterback.
Sure.
Like, I'm keep giving me tips, keep forcing me to think about my fundamentals. Yeah, keep me focused. But after 3 years, I should have it down how to get to the quarterback. And I understand if he felt like that's who he was at his best, that's fine. Unfortunately, if you came back for the purpose of winning a national championship, that wasn't putting your defense in the best situation. Constantly trying to, especially against the top teams with big offensive linemen with reach. That's not how you're most effective for Notre Dame. So
yeah,
it's just interesting, because I'm not going to sit here and call him a selfish individual.
I wouldn't do that either.
It brings to question though when you have guys come back,
right,
when they could have gone to the NFL. How locked in are they really on the team aspect as opposed to them?
Yeah. Well, and I would say this, Sean, I think that Isaiah Foskey showed me during the season that I do think he was locked in and he was a competitive cat because, you got off to that bad start and I thought he had a really nice game against North Carolina, right? Like he came back and he was like, nah, dude, like we're going to do this, right? Against USC, he wasn't having a tremendous job as a pass rusher, but he was setting the edge firm, man. He was playing hard. Like he was playing hard. So Isaiah didn't pack it in. I just more think that maybe he's a little bit set in his ways as far as who he is as a player, when in reality, I think that he can be a more impactful football player down the line.
So it almost makes you feel like he's satisfied with who he is.
Or he just has a very one-track perspective on who he is and doesn't think outside the spectrum, right? Because because there's some people that just look at themselves in one way and they never it's like a person that's in a job, right? You get a job right out of college. You think that you're just this your entire life, right?
Right.
When in reality, I mean, like I was a teacher, right? I could have just kind of put those blinders on and be like, that's all I'll ever be as a teacher. It's all I'll ever be. But in reality, when you start looking out and you start really evaluating, you're like, oh wait, I could actually do that too. I could do that if I wanted to. Yeah. You don't have to just limit yourself. And I think that's what Isaiah does a little bit sometimes, man. I think he limits the full variety of what a type of pass rusher he can be. Yeah. I don't think he's just a power rusher. I don't think that's what he is. I think that he has nuance that he can add to his game. I think he's a gifted athlete. We saw that in Indianapolis. And if you combine some of those parts together or all three together, we're talking about Isaiah Foskey being an incredibly impactful football player on the NFL level, which I think he can be. I really do, man. His talent is undeniable. Like, nobody can deny, even people that hate Notre Dame, they can't look at Isaiah Foskey and say, you know what? That guy's not talented. Yeah, right. He's 6'5" and an 8, 264 pounds, and ran a 4.58. He's incredibly talented, man. I just want him to take the blinders off. Isaiah, be the best player you can be, man, because I still think there's more there. I still think there's more there.
Yeah. And I think we've don't get me too bad, okay, Ryan? I'm about to say something.
What are your,
and I hate that I have to mention his name.
Oh no.
Okay. But I think the one thing that stood out for me, let me start here. The one thing that stood out for me is that we talk about the gap between Georgia and Notre Dame. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching, and I watch Nolan Smith and I watch Robert Beal, and I say, oh, okay. I see. The gap is evident, right? It's evident right there. It's like, okay, we have one Isaiah Foskey, and they have just 4 or 5 of these guys just floating around on the depth chart.
It's a great point, because I mean, Sean, it's a great point, because it's like if Isaiah Foskey went to Georgia, Isaiah Foskey would play and he would be impactful, right? Because he is that caliber of a football player. But the difference between Notre Dame and Georgia is that they have 5 Isaiah Foskeys, not 1 Isaiah Foskey. That's the difference.
Exactly.
That's the difference.
Exactly. And one of them got hurt early and didn't even play.
Yeah.
And just shows up and runs like a 4.4.
Sean, one of the forgotten, I know he ran 4.39 at 238 pounds, right? 41.5-inch vert. Nolan Smith's a freak. But the one thing that people didn't talk about enough in the 2021 season, so the 2022 national championship, was that no one talked about the fact that at Georgia's best pass rusher the first 5 games of the season was Adam Anderson, who got into legal issues. They lost Adam Anderson, and they didn't lose a dang beat, man. It's Nolan Smith, Robert Beal, come on down. This year, Jalen Carter misses a couple of games. Oh, hey, Nasir Stackhouse, come here. Bear Alexander, come on over. Warren Brinson, come on down. The depth that Georgia has is what's really different. That's what makes them a different type of program right now. Yeah. It's not that Notre Dame's top tier players aren't as good as Georgia. I don't agree with that fully. I don't. It's the depth. They have 6 of those dudes instead of just one of those dudes.
I was looking at the measurables of the early enrollees, and I'm like, oh, that's sweet. Devin Houston's 6'4", 282 already.
I know, man.
Okay,
I know.
He's playing. He's playing early. He's playing this year, and then I'm like, where's the other one? Should we have 2 in this class like that? And that's the level the recruiting needs to get to along the defensive line, where you're coming with, we have 2 of those guys.
Right.
They're coming. We got 2 of those guys coming, and we got 2 guys that are pass rushers coming on the outside.
Sean, think about it this way, man. You saw the national championship game, right?
Yeah.
Who was the best defensive tackle in the national championship game for Georgia? It was Bear Alexander,
Bear
man.
Alexander.
It was Bear Alexander.
Absolutely.
Bear Alexander barely played this season. Barely played, man. If he was on Notre Dame this year, he's playing almost every snap.
Yeah.
Almost every one.
Yeah. And that for me, like you said, sensible people use the combine to confirm what we see, right? And what we saw was confirmation not only of who Isaiah Foskey was on film and the amount of talent he has to get better on the next level, if he will go buy into it.
Yes.
If he will buy into it, but it also points out, okay, this is the gap between, I think, the difference between Isaiah Foskey at 4'5" and Carter and Beal at 4'3'9", 4'4'2", I think, respectively.
4'4'8", I think.
4'4'8".
Yeah.
It's like a step or a step and a half. That's like a corner and a guy getting the ball off and a strip sack. So like Isaiah Foskey just missed. And Nolan Smith got there, strip sack, touchdown, or either you have the ball. And that is the type of athlete and difference maker that, you need to have on your roster when you're trying to win a national championship. So, we talk about a recruiting standpoint. And Cameron Clark, can he be that guy? Like he's fast.
Yeah.
Can he be? I mean, like you said, Nolan Smith is measurables. He's not huge. He's like, 239?
238, yeah.
238.
Yeah.
So
Nolan Smith's not long either, man. He's got like 32 and some inch arms. Like it's not like he's like this like long. I mean, if you look at him and Isaiah Foskey standing next to each other, you'd be like, I want Foskey. I want that guy, right? And I mean, he was more impactful for his team than what Nolan Smith was for Georgia even. I mean, again, there's some context, right? We're talking about a 6'2", 238-pound guy compared to Isaiah Foskey, who's 6'5", 264. Like, very different football players, obviously.
Absolutely.
But I think the point still stands, though, Sean, is that we talk about Justin Scott a lot, right, in 2024?
Yeah.
And it's like, Notre Dame needs to get Justin Scott because he's one of the probably 5 best players in the class. But they don't need – they also need more than just Justin Scott because there's going to be plays where Justin Scott has to come off the field, man. Like, you need more.
Say it.
Need more than that, man.
Yes.
Like, you need to follow up that class with some other impactful football players. It can't just be Justin Scott and everyone else. It can't just be Isaiah Foskey and everybody else. Like, you need depth. You need to find it on the defensive line. So we'll see. That was a great conversation, man, built off of one player's performance. Let's move on, Sean. And I'm going in order for people that don't know as far as when these people did their testing throughout the week. So Isaiah Foskey was day 1 of on-field testing. Day 2 was the defensive backs, which means Brandon Joseph was the one that was a participant that day, and obviously representing University of Notre Dame, also representing Northwestern. So, Sean, I'll be very honest, this one, right? I loved Brandon Joseph after the COVID season 2020. I thought he was fantastic. After 2021, I thought he was still good, but not quite as good as the year before. This past year, well, I don't need to recap Notre Dame fans what happened this year with Brandon Joseph. Like, he just seemed to disappear a lot, right? And there were a couple good games. Like Syracuse, he was excellent in my opinion. Ohio State was really good. And there was a lot of no-shows in between those games, though, right? Like, there was a lot of no-shows. We got the media availability. I think he's a highly intelligent football player, and I want to buy into him so bad, Sean. I literally turned to another media member, a good friend of mine, and I was like, I want to buy into Brandon Joseph so bad, man, because he's just such a smart kid, and he's had really good ball production, and there's been some good film out there. Then he gets to the on-field section of the testing, though, Sean. Man, not great, man. Just not great. I mean, it was just incredibly underwhelming. Right, I think he ran 4.62 in the 40, which is not a great 40 for a free safety. Had like a 30-inch vert, a sub-10 in the broad jump. The short shuttle stuff wasn't great either. Like, all around, tested as a below-average athlete, man. So now I'm sitting here, Sean, after regression the last 2 years and not a very impactful 2024 season. 2022 season. Now leading into a less than stellar all-star game and combine performance, I don't know what to think of Brandon Joseph's draft stock, man. Like I wouldn't be shocked if he doesn't get drafted at this point.
I got nothing. I got nothing. I have not, man. I got nothing. I didn't expect anything from him. Once again, the combine confirms. It confirms what we saw on film all year. Absolutely. And not explosive, which is strange. It's like you said, you go back to that 20 year and you start to project his athleticism. You're like, I remember we were talking on the field at the end of Pro Day last year, remember?
Yep.
And we were like excited saying, yo, Pro Day next year
it's gonna be wild.
Has a chance of really being good. And
Yep.
we were really thinking about the times that could be run at Notre Dame's Pro Day with the guys that could be leaving. And
Sean,
I think we both expected more or better.
I at least expected the short area stuff to be better, man. Like I expected a good 3-cone. I expected a good short shuttle. Like that stuff wasn't even good, man. I'm just like, I don't get it. I don't get it, man. Like, he's a confusing player to me. I think the instincts are great. I think he plays like a better athlete on film than what he tested like. But I don't know what I hang my hat on right now. I don't know what to hang my hat on.
It's confusing because what does it confirm, right? Because you have the 20 film.
Yeah, which was great.
20 film, which is great. And then you have moments like, yo, him against Ohio State, he was flying around. He was flying around the field.
Sean, after that first game, man, I was like, oh, man, the old Brandon Joseph's back, baby.
Absolutely.
And then, no, it wasn't.
And then, like, in between, you just have these just disappointing moments, missed tackles, looking bad in space. He's looking like more comfortable as a rover rather than a safety. It's like it's just mind-boggling, but it confirms the inconsistency that we saw.
If you didn't like Brandon Joseph going into the combine, you didn't leave liking him anymore after the combine, man. Like it was just he's been consistent this season, Sean. It's been consistently disappointing. That's just what it's been. That was his Notre Dame tenure. All due respect to him. That was his combine performance. It just wasn't good, man. It just wasn't good.
It was almost like he didn't even prepare. He just showed up. The same guy he was all year on film.
and maybe we overrated how good he was, I guess, partly. But still, man, like you can't tell me that he was that impactful early in his career and he just wasn't nearly that guy again. Like it was just weird to me.
Maybe we got caught up in the people he was next to at Northwestern.
The Greg Newsoms of the world.
Greg Newsoms, yeah, he was next. That secondary was darn good.
It was.
Just overall. That was a darn good secondary. So it's something I worry about, honestly, for my Illini moving forward. Because, I understand. Like, every piece of that secondary performed well at the combine. Every last one of them. It's like, okay, now I understand why this darn secondary was.
Dude,
Sean,
I didn't expect Jertavius Martin to be that much of a freak. By the way, man, I thought he was gonna be good, but like a freak like that, like wow.
I didn't expect Sidney Brown. I didn't expect Sidney Brown to run as well as he did. Like you said, Martin. We know who Witherspoon is. It's just like
I like the Kendall Smith kid too, man. Like he didn't get a combine invite, but I think he's talented as well. I mean,
he's going to show well at the Pro Day. It's a talented group, and that's what we're talking about. Like the next class, will it be the Benjamin Morrison crew that finally goes to the combine for Notre Dame and kind of just?
Well, we're gonna get into this in a couple minutes, Sean, because we do have a little bit of a preview that we want to put out there from the 2024 class. We'll get there, man. Let's go through probably the most overthought player of the 2023 NFL draft, in my opinion. Michael Mayer, All-American tight ends, multiple times, 180 career catches, 2,099 yards, 18 touchdowns. Somehow didn't win a Mackey Award during the course of his career. I still would love someone to make me understand that one a little bit more. Sean, there was this weird opinion out there that Michael Mayer tested poorly, tested like a bad athlete. And I did not get this at all, man. If you look, everyone loves that relative athletic score stuff, right? RAS. Tested out really well, man. Tested out really well. I ran 4.7 flat, which is a solid number for Michael Mayer. I don't think anybody expected him to be a 4.5 cat, right? Like no one expected that. Like I thought 4.6 something would be probably the highest that he could go. Runs 4.7 flat. The explosiveness was good. I mean, he checked boxes from the vertical, from the broad especially. Those numbers were both above average.
Yeah.
And I'm looking and I'm just like, people are like losing their minds. Like this kid's a bad athlete. And I'm just like, no, he's a good athlete. He's just not like the straight line fast guy. Like he's not going to run like a couple of these other guys in the straight line because it's not, if you watch Notre Dame, you knew that he wasn't going to be that type of dude.
Yeah.
But he checked the boxes from a testing perspective. And then Sean, I'll say this, man. He killed the on-field workouts. When he was running routes, when he was doing the gauntlet, all that stuff that really is more translatable to being a football player, Michael Mayer was a dog all day. Like he was a dog. So I phrased it as Michael Mayer took care of business. I think Michael Mayer had proved everything that he had to prove. His media availability was one of the most impressive all week. He is a really smart, sharp kid that is so competitive, man. You can just hear it in his voice with how he speaks. I thought he took care of business, and I just think Michael Mayer is. We literally did this last year with Kyle Hamilton from a media perspective. We did this last year, Sean. Remember when he ran the bad 40, and everyone's like, "Oh, Kyle Hamilton's overrated," and then he goes in the highest rated rookie
safety
ever.
Can I tell this story?
Yeah,
Can I tell this story? So we're at the pro day last year, right? So Double R has the 40.
Yeah,
he was clocking the 40s, right? So I'm like on the other side of the field. I forget. I think I was watching the bench press or something. I don't know what it was, but he run the 40, and I watched Kyle run his 40 from across the field. And I never forget, you walked up to me and you were like, ugh. And I was like, wait a minute. I was like, was it that bad? And you were like, I don't know. But that just goes back to like overthinking it. Like,
well, Sean, he ran worse at the pro day than he did the combine, and I did not care at all. You know why? Because Kyle Hamilton was really good on film, man. Like, that's all it is.
Yes. I remember you walking up to me vividly and being like, ugh. I'm like, okay. But like you said, we were shocked that he dropped the way he did in the draft. Like, what is going on? And then Paul's writing like, look, man, I heard some people talk about, man, I would rather have a tight end that has more wiggle. Have you not watched Notre Dame film?
That's
what are you talking about,
Sean. That's the worst opinion that's out there. Is people think that Michael Mayer is like this tight, not flexible athlete. I'm like, have you seen him break off some routes, man? Like he can get in and out of breaks, guy. Like he can move.
Shout out to the NFL and the combine for adjusting their on-field stuff.
Yes.
Because we saw some new things and new setups for the running backs, the wide receivers. Because the one thing that stood out, especially on the fade route part, like you saw how quick Michael Mayer's feet were in that field drill. And I'm like, whoa. And that's what helps him get in and out of breaks.
Yeah.
Like you might be watching the upper body and see something that seems a little stiff, but his feet are incredible in running routes. So he doesn't have to be 4'4", 4'8". He can be 4'6" He can be 4'6" and play faster because he has great feet.
Yeah.
And he did everything. Wait a minute. Understand this. He did everything with teams double teamed him for 2 seasons.
Yeah.
At Notre Dame. 2. And he did what he did.
Man, it's just so frustrating, man.
So what they're going to do, let me tell you how dumb this is why NFL executives are dumb, right?
Yes.
This is why they're dumb, because the teams that really need help are at the top of each round, right? That's the way it goes, right?
Yep.
But they're going to overthink this. And they're going to let Michael Mayer go to a good team.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
They're
He's going to go. He's going to go.
Mayer,
He's going to go 28th in Cincinnati Bengals, Sean. That's what's going to happen.
He's going to go to the Bengals or the Chiefs, knowing the Chiefs.
Could you imagine if he was the Chiefs?
Knowing that they have Kelsey on the back end of his career, more than likely, the Chiefs will jump the Bengals and say, "Oh no, we can't let him get you. We'll give Pat another piece because we're already a 12 personnel team, right? That's how they approach Philly, right? They're a 12 personnel team, right?
Yep. And they were throwing Noah Gray out there. They could throw out.
Absolutely. So you don't think they can't upgrade the tight end position? So we'll go ahead. We'll get Michael Mayer and Travis Kelce, and we'll just, who are you? Are you really about to double Travis Kelce now? Are you really about to do that? Look, man, this is why the great organizations stay great.
Yes.
Because all of the other teams overthink it.
But the Baltimore Ravens, the Kansas City Chiefs, like they just let good ball to their lap, man. That's all it is.
Absolutely.
It's like the Kansas City last year in the third round let Leo Chenal from Wisconsin just fall into their lap, man. They let Creed Humphrey fall into their lap at the end of the second round 2 years ago. They let Trey Smith fall into their lap in the sixth round because of the medical issues. Like they just take good football players when football players are on the board. That's where we are. Three examples real quick on Michael Mayer, Sean. And I think because there is a possibility that Michael Mayer falls a little bit in this class. There is, because people overthink this all the time. They do. One, in the 2018 NFL Draft, Dallas Goedert, who has turned into a Pro Bowl tight end for the Philadelphia Eagles out of South Dakota State, Sean, he was the second tight end drafted that year. You know who's the first?
I should know this. Who was it?
Mike Gesicki.
Mike Gesicki from Penn State.
Combine freak Mike Gesicki. Yes, let's take him over the actual good football player in Dallas Goedert. Here's another one, Sean. Someone on Twitter tried to insult Michael Mayer on my thread and said he's a lot more Jason Witten than he is Travis Kelce. All right? Similarly, Jason Witten and Michael Mayer are tested pretty similarly. People forget that Jason Witten was actually a good athlete coming out of Tennessee. They just remember the late
coming out. Yeah.
Jason Witten lasted until the third round of the draft when he came out, Sean. And someone used him as an insult. And I'm like, Jason Witten caught 1,200 passes and went to 11 Pro Bowls, right? He's going to make the Hall of Fame.
He's a Hall of Famer.
Yeah. And I'm just like, guys, he's pretty dang good, sir.
But I would still say, in my opinion, I would say Michael Mayer still has better feet. But Jason Witten, was like, you want a combination of blocking, route running. He wasn't about to take the top off the defense.
I just couldn't believe that someone used him as an insult, man. I'm just like, Jason Witten was like really good, right? Like he was really good football player. Literally 1,228 catches and made 11 Pro Bowls, Sean. 11 Pro Bowls, man.
And I was watching, I think, the coverage, and I think it was Jeremiah. He was just fawning over Dalton Kincaid. Just, oh my God, watch how quick he gets out of breaks. And I'm like, okay. All right.
Yeah. Oh, and here's a good one, Sean. Last guy I want to bring up. And Jay Henry is my guy because this is the last example I was going to use. Jay Henry said, I think Mayer is Mark Andrews from Baltimore. Jay.
Okay.
I agree with you, sir. I agree with you. He's a comp that I gave. You know what else about Mark Andrews? Mark Andrews was incredibly productive at Oklahoma. Tested, not, superb, about where Michael Mayer was. Good athlete, not a great athlete. Mark Andrews went in the third round, Sean, of the 2018 NFL draft. He was drafted after Mike Gesicki. He was drafted after Dallas Goedert, who's a good football player that I mentioned already. He was also drafted. He was the third tight end off that board. So Mike Gesicki in one draft went before Mark Andrews and Dallas Goedert's. That happens. You know why it happens? Because I see people saying he was very good at Penn State. He was a good football player at Penn State, man, Mike Gesicki. He wasn't a great player, though. He went before those guys, though, because he blew up the combine. Had nothing to do with film. Had zero to do with film. Because Mike Gesicki, we know, was incredibly tight as a route runner. Really good in the straight line, for sure. Really good route runner. Didn't block a lick and still can't block a lick.
None.
Still can't block a lick.
None. Who was his quarterback? Trace
McSorley.
Trace McSorley?
Yep. It's, yeah, man. And again, I just, Sean, I'm still like killing it in my mind, man, where I'm like, people really use Jason Witten as a knock on Michael Mayer. Like, he's more Jason Witten. Okay, so he's going to make the Hall of Fame? Okay. Oh, man, I hate people so much. It's just so funny. Last guy, Sean, we spent too much time on that one. Jared Patterson was in the last day of testing on Sunday, offensive line group. I had mixed feelings on this one, Sean. I thought he looked really good in the field work, and two of his tests were good. Like three of his tests were good. He had a good broad jump. He had a good vertical for his size, both above average, well above average. And his 10-yard split was good as well. I think it was like 1.82. It was above average. It was good testing. His 40 time was not good, but I would say like 40 time does not matter to me for an offensive lineman. I care about that 10-yard split. His 10-yard split was good, cool. But he had some bad short area numbers. Like the 20-yard shuttle wasn't awful. The 3-cone was terrible, though. Like, it was terrible. It was terrible, and the shuttle was below average, right? It wasn't terrible, though, but it was below average. I don't know what to think about Jared Patterson anymore, Sean. I still think that he ends up going in the mid day 3 range. Like, I still think he's going to be a 4th to 5th round draft pick somewhere because he started for 4 years at Notre Dame at 2 different positions. And he also carries that Notre Dame legacy with him, right? He's stamped that he was a Notre Dame offensive lineman. That matters to people. It does. No matter if people want to act like it doesn't or not. But I didn't think his film this year was great. I thought it was good at times and inconsistent at others. And then he's got the durability stuff. And then I thought the testing was solid but unspectacular is how I put it. Solid but unspectacular. I still think he's a good football player, obviously, but I don't think he's the player that we once thought he could be, in my opinion.
We just interviewed Robert Hainsey, and I think the path that Robert Hainsey took, totally different position, because Robert Hainsey was playing tackle at Notre Dame, right?
Yep.
But I think it applies because he ended up going from tackle to interior and playing guard. And, of course, they lose Jensen 3rd day of camp this year in Tampa Bay, and ultimately he ends up being a starting center. And I think the strength of Patterson is going to be his versatility. Like, he's played pretty much every position at Notre Dame. I think he ends up settling as a center. And I think he ends up outplaying wherever he's drafted. So if you're saying 3rd day and that's where he lands, I end up feeling like he's going to definitely eventually be a Pro Bowl player at center in my position. I think he's going to end up at as a center. His injuries at guard would make me, that's the only thing I'm worried about, his injuries, because he's been injury prone. But just the pedigree, it's the same thing Robert Hainsey told us after his first training camp. He was like, yo, I'm trash. Like, but that's what, you take that next step and you realize, like, there's more to this. Like, even though you're good on the college level, there's levels to this thing. And the fact that he put in the work, came back to campus, because Harry was back, worked with Harry, worked with some guys, and then went out, and I think Shipley was a longtime offensive lineman that he worked with out in Arizona. He put in the work. And as long as Jared Patterson puts in the work, along with the group of guys that get together, the Notre Dame guys always seem to get together during the offseason, I see no difference with him. I think he's going to be a solid. Notre Dame guys always perform in the NFL. It's going to be a health issue for him. And if he stays healthy, I see him being a very productive center/guard for some team. And you know better than this. My question to you would be, what run system would be more beneficial for him? Would it be more beneficial for him to go to a zone team?
Yeah.
Will it be more beneficial for him to go to another type of run game? That for him, I think will be key.
Yeah, I think he's definitely a heavy zone blocker. I mean, he's definitely a movement-based player. Because Sean, I don't think that he has a great power profile. I think it's improving, but not great, right? Like just solid power profile. He's not a gap scheme center, in my opinion. He's a guy that's like, let's get him on the move. Let's combo to the second level, get him out in space a little bit. Because I still think, even though he didn't have a great 40 time or whatever, like I still think Jared Patterson's a good athlete on film. For a center spot, I think so. I think he can move a good bit. So I think that there's a baseline for Jared Patterson as well. As long as he's healthy, to your point, I think he'll be able to back up a couple different positions. He can back up all three spots on the interior, right? Like he can back up all three spots, and then maybe he's a starter eventually. But it was after his redshirt freshman season. I think we thought that Jared Patterson might be one of the next big guys from the Notre Dame offensive line perspective. Yeah. And he just never took a next step. Like he was just always kind of the same, like he's a good player. Wasn't a great player,
Remember, like this time last year, they were talking about putting him at tackling.
Yeah.
Kicking Blake Fisher inside, and it's like
with 31 and 5/8 inch arms. Yeah. Probably wasn't the best idea from the Notre Dame offensive line team.
No.
Yes. Very, very happy that one did not happen because he's definitely an interior offensive lineman. There's no doubt. But
absolutely.
Sean, that's the 2023 NFL Scouting Combine. Kind of a little update on how some of the players performed there, the 4 Notre Dame players. Sean, real quick, man, before we get into the mailbag, we already have a ton of mailbag questions. We'll work through as many as we possibly can when we get there. I wanted to talk about a couple of the guys that could be in the 2024 NFL Scouting Combine that are coming back on the roster, man.
Yeah.
I mean, Sean, we had to start with the offensive tackles, right? And it's no guarantee that Joe Alt and Blake Fisher are both going to be in the 2024 NFL draft. I would say this. I think it's a better chance right now, based upon accolades, that Joe Alt is that guy that leaves early. That would be my guess right now. But there's a possibility that you could lose both of those guys to the NFL after next season.
Yeah. I think the chances are right now, I'm going to go ahead and be objective. I'll say the chances are 60% that they both end up in the draft.
It's possible
next year. Yeah. But the history at Notre Dame, with the caveat of it being Harry Heastand being the offensive line coach, there has been a history of guys coming back for their senior season.
Yeah.
To play for Notre Dame on the offensive line. So, yeah, of course, I think everybody in here would love to have both of them come back for their senior seasons. But, just looking forward, I think Joe Alt will probably test better.
You think Joe Alt will test better?
I think he will run better.
He would run, just because of the weight difference, right?
Yeah. He would run better. Might move better. 3-cone.
I'll say this though, man. I think if you see them both like side by side, though, some NFL scouts are gonna be like, "Whoa, look at Blake Fisher, man! It's wild. It's like he's just a massive kid, just like broad shoulders, tall, just big everywhere, And I think they'll both check all the boxes that you want from like the size measurable perspective. I bet that Joe Alt probably runs a little faster. Blake Fisher might jump a little further, though. He might be a little more low body explosive than what Joe is. But man, Notre Dame has a chance, Sean. Though, if they both come out, that's about as. I mean, we talked a lot this year about DeJuan Jones and Paris Johnson and that duo, right? Yeah. And impressive football players from a size perspective. And, I know Paris, didn't do a ton during the combine. DeJuan, I know, ran a 40 and, some people were like, oh, he only ran 5'3" something. I'm like, he's 375 pounds. Like, what did you expect him to run? Right. But Notre Dame has a chance, man. If you want to sell continuing offensive line, at Notre Dame, like, hey, did you see those two guys both at the combine this year for Notre Dame? Because I think Joe Alt's going to have a nice variables from a arm length perspective. He's going to look
Yeah.
good in drills, all that great stuff because he's so controlled. He's so athletic. Blake Fisher might be a little bit more all over the place, man, but then you're going to see like the explosive stuff. You're just going to be like, yeah, he's pretty talented, man. Like he's pretty talented, you know? So,
Yeah.
I-
But like,
Yeah.
dude, Notre Dame's been in this position before, right? I think Ronnie ended up coming back. Ronnie could have left. He could have left early. He came back. I think McGlinchey probably could have left early.
He did.
He came back. You know, Notre Dame kids, once again, with the caveat of Harry Heastan being, you know, the offensive line coach at the time, traditionally have had those decisions before them and have chosen to come back because they love the school, they love the program, and they love their guys. So, you know, as much as we're projecting that they have the talent to enter their names into the NFL draft and forego their senior seasons, Joe Alt will have far more playing experience
Yes.
than Blake Fisher. And
Yep.
that's going to say a lot. But other than that, I think they both will test well.
I think so.
They both will test well.
I think they would.
They both will test well. You know,
Sean, that takes me to the other side I wanted to talk about. Let's talk about some defensive guys before there's a couple other guys I want to hit on and kind of wrap this. Defensive line wise, I think Javonte Jean-Baptiste, who's an Ohio State transfer, he probably wouldn't got a combine invite this year because he did have some borderline draftable grades, you know, some 7th round, some PFA. So he probably would have gotten to Indianapolis this year, excuse me. I know for sure he had an East-West Shrine Bowl invite. So he was going to go at least to Las Vegas for the All-Star event out there. Javonte Jean-Baptiste is one. Riley Mills is the other that I wrote down as a potential guy that could be in next year's draft that could blow the doors off the place because he's going to be a senior now, 4th-year player.
Yeah.
I know he'll still have more eligibility if he chooses to use it. But, Sean, I'm going to say something, and I want your reaction to it, man. And please disagree if you think. I think Riley Mills could blow the doors off of testing in Indianapolis, man. He's going to show up at like 6'5" and some change, 300 pounds, and he's going to move a lot better than a lot of 300-pounders that go to Indianapolis.
I would agree with that. I think he would kill the strength. He would kill the bench press. I think the broad jump. I think he would test better than most people would expect him to do. And I think his 40 would probably be in the 4.7.
I don't know what that. I mean,
4.8
at 300 pounds, maybe 4.8, 4.9, somewhere in that ballpark. Yeah, I think he's going to test well, man. I really do. I think the broad jump's going to be good.
Yeah,
and I think recone for as big as he is for a 300-pounder, you're going to be like, oh, that's why he played on the end at Notre Dame a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Like that's one right there. So he could surprise some people. I think, man. I think he really can.
Well.
Yeah,
I think so as well.
And obviously, I mean, 2 guys that we know are going to be there, Sean. One from both sides of the ball. Cam Hart's going to be at the combine next year. There's no doubt. I mean, he had a Senior Bowl invite. He chose obviously to go back to school because of the injury and everything, but he had a Senior Bowl invite. He'll test next year most likely, unless he chooses not to. And then
Cam runs a 4. If Cam can run a 4.5, if he runs a 4.4.
I've been told, man, there's a chance that he could run 4.4 high, like 4.47, 4.48, somewhere in that ballpark, man.
If he runs 4.51, NFL teams would probably be comfortable.
And we had, I actually have the official measurements on Cam Hart from last spring because obviously he was a senior. So when the NFL went around to do their measurements, Cam Hart was a guy that they got official measurements on. So let me pull this up real quick. I know I have this. I looked at it before.
And let me just say this. The reason why I love Cam Hart goes beyond football. Like, I don't think, and I'll reiterate this, I don't think people understand how much he sacrificed himself for the team. Like, this is a guy that whether, he was asked to moved on his own, he was moved and asked to be a number 1. Like, guys move to the other side of the ball all the time. I don't know a lot of guys that are moved and immediately asked to be, you have to be a number 1 cornerback. And to come over and kind of succeed at that off the bat. And so you can look at what you might think is athletic limitations, not as fast as you would want him to be. but the guy made plays, and
Yep.
he's battled through. So he plays through injury. He's tough. As there have been games where they've needed him, and he's played.
Yep.
He's played. Why? Because my team needs me to play.
And
And
NFL,
those are the
NFL
type of guys I
evaluators,
love.
yeah, NFL evaluators are going to love that part, Sean. But then they're probably not going to like the medicals too much.
No, they're not. They're
Yeah,
not.
yeah,
They're not. And this is why he understands his health is vitally important this season.
yeah.
He understands that. That's the proven point. Can he stay healthy?
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting because I pulled out the measurements, Sean. 6'2" and 5/8, so he's almost 6'3".
Yeah.
Less than a quarter of an inch from, actually a little more than a quarter of an inch from 6'3". 198 pounds and had 32.5-inch arms this past spring. For comparison, Peter Skoronski, who might be the best offensive lineman in the class, it's a good argument between him and Paris Johnson Jr. out of Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
Cam Hart has longer arms than Peter Skoronski does. I just want people to think about that for a second. And like Peter Skoronski has shorter arms for an offensive lineman. So, what a grain of salt, right? But 32.5-inch arms is very long for a corner. He's got longer arms by almost a full inch to Jared Patterson. Almost a full inch longer than Jared Patterson.
So you're telling me the Bears might be drafting a velociraptor, huh? Like with the short arms as a tackle.
But in comparison to Cam Hart, you might be drafting a pterodactyl next year. Right? So yeah,
right.
So it'll be interesting, man. I think Cam's going to test well though, as long as the injuries haven't like zapped him of athleticism. But I think he'll test well as an all-around athlete. One guy, Sean, that people aren't going to care as much about. People aren't going to care as much about the testing, but it's more about him being there and throwing. Is Sam Hartman. Yeah. Who is obviously quarterback at Notre Dame, former Wake Forest transfer. He's a shoo-in to be at the Combine next year. Like, there's no doubt about it. The production he's had over the course of his career, he's played obviously in the ACC and now with Notre Dame, his final year. He'll be there, barring some catastrophic injury. And, so I don't want to spend too much time on him because, again, it's not like he's going to set the world on fire from a 40 perspective or do any of that stuff. But, test it, being able to meet with teams, throwing the football, that stuff will be interesting. A couple guys I wanted to throw out real quick, Sean. And this is a couple of wild cards. And I think the wild cards both come from the running back room, man. Audric Estime, Logan Diggs, both third-year players and running backs. I always told running back, man, if you're going to get drafted – and even if you have if you are a third-year player and you're going to get drafted, go to the NFL. Go. Mm-hmm. You have a small shelf life, especially Audric Estime and Logan Diggs. They play a more physical brand, so they're going to take more hits, right? Like there's only so much tread on those type of tires. I'll say this though, Sean, and I would love to hear your insight on both players. I guarantee, and this is just my speculation. I think that Audric Estime, when he tests, whether it's for the 2024 NFL draft or 2025 NFL draft, I bet you he surprises a lot of cats with how he tests, man. I bet he broads well. I bet he runs a faster 40 than some people anticipate at 230 pounds. Just my opinion, though. I think he's going to test really well.
Yeah, I can agree with that. And look, just to point out, if I had to wager, I will wager that the combination of Estime and Diggs both leave before I wager that the combination of Alt and Fisher both leave. If I had to choose which combo would enter the draft early, I would take the running backs for multiple reasons. And I think they both have a chance to go over 1,000 yards. And we're good. Right? I think Notre Dame fans we're fully supporting that and cheering for that to happen, right? Because we know Jadarian Price, we know Jeremiah, we know what's behind them, right? We know what's behind them. So we're like, yes, go ahead. By all means, show out this year, enter your name to the draft, get to your bag as fast as you can, and let the youngsters that are behind you come and be the future of that position with Dylan McCullough. And then Chris Tyree, just because he is a senior, is going to be there as well. And I expect him to test really well. I expect him to be fast.
Yeah,
I
I forgot
expect
to
him to be
mention
able to,
Tyree. I forgot to mention Tyree.
I,
He's going to
I,
run very fast. He's going to run
very
very fast.
fast. I expect him to catch the ball well out of the backfield and test well. So, yeah.
It's going to be interesting, man. And we're looking forward, obviously, to what the next cycle is as far as the draft prospects for Notre Dame. Because as we know, the more success Notre Dame has putting players to the NFL, the easier it is to recruit, the easier it is to sell your program, obviously, right? So that's a little bit of the NFL draft talk, a little bit of scouting combine recap, and look forward to the 2024 recruiting class. We're going to get into 2024 NFL draft class potentially for Notre Dame. So we're going to get into the mailbag next. Before we do, if you could please hit that like button, subscribe to the podcast, hit that 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform, notification bells, as we'll have a lot more shows, obviously going into the rest of the week, more of a normalized schedule now that I'm back from Indianapolis. And as always, thank you all so much for tuning in to the Irish Breakdown podcast.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Sean, I think we had a super chat earlier. Wanted to get to it first. We're going to roll through some of these questions as quickly as we can. We had a question from Charlie Weiss's Last Belt Loop. Said, hi, IB. And Charlie, thank you so much for the super chat. We really appreciate it. Hi, IB. Hope you have a great week. Isaiah Foskey recently stated he wouldn't have came back to Notre Dame if NIL was around in 2019. Will this hurt with recruiting? Thank you, IB. So he wouldn't have come back to Notre Dame if NIL was around in 2019. Wait, so he couldn't have come out after 2019, though. Wait, I'm a little confused on this one, timeline-wise.
Yeah. Is he saying he would have transferred? I don't know.
Oh, is that? Oh, so he's saying coming out of high school, he would have went to a different school if NIL was allowed at that point. It's like he would have probably stayed out west or something like that. Is that what we're trying to say? Is that what I'm reading, Sean? I just want to make sure I'm reading the right thing.
That's the only thing that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Based upon what I'm reading, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so Charlie, it's a great question, man. I would say this for me. Is it going to hurt Notre Dame? Not now. I mean, because at the end of the day, Notre Dame is taking steps in the NIL landscape. We talked about the young lady that they hired as their I forget what the term was for it, Sean, but it was something, it was some NIL consultant or something like that. I forget her official title, director or something like that.
Director of the NIL collective or something like that.
As long as Notre Dame doesn't completely avoid the issue and just kind of puts it underneath the rug, I think, you need to take the steps necessary to show that you are willing to help these student athletes at the end of the day, right? Like, that's my biggest thing. So, I don't think it'll hurt them as much right now. I think that this is more of like, hey, we need to take steps to the future. And as long as they do, I think they'll have some opportunities to keep moving, personally. Any thoughts on that, Sean? I don't know if you think it'll hurt them at all, or I don't know.
Look, it is what it is, man. That is what it is as far as NIL and support in any other area when it comes to, helping Marcus Freeman in the football program. We know it is what it is, so there's a young man telling you flat out that just graduated from Notre Dame. During his recruitment, if NIL was available, he probably wouldn't have chosen Notre Dame. That should speak volumes.
Yeah, and now I see that Charlie just gave another super chat. Charlie just clarified. It was what we were thinking, obviously. I was saying he would never have came to Notre Dame at all if NIL was around in 2019. Thanks. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you for clarifying that, man. Yeah, I mean, if he was, I would say this, Sean, because Isaiah Foskey's viewed as like probably more of a second round type of player. Maybe if this was like Will Anderson saying it or something like that, right? Like a guy that was potentially going first overall or like a top 4 pick, maybe that'll be somewhat different. But I don't think it would have as much gravity to it, in my opinion. But I don't know. Next question we had, and Charlie, thanks again for the super chats. We appreciate it. From Archer452 said, mailbag, with Brian Mason leaving, would you use that coaching slot on another special teams coach or add someone of the other side or on the other sides of the ball. So add another defensive assistant or an offensive assistant rather than a special teams coordinator.
You can't. You need a special teams coach. I don't want a GA coaching special teams.
So, Sean, maybe you would know this better than I would. I mean, I could go back and look at a roster and such. Who was before Brian Polian was the special teams coordinator? Do you know who coached special teams before that? Any idea?
Scott Booker.
Scott Booker. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I think it was Scott Booker.
That sounds correct. Correct. Yeah, I mean, I think for the sake of the 2022 season, Sean, too, Notre Dame special teams were a big strength for them, right? Like that helped them win some football games. Like, that was a difference.
Games.
Yeah.
A lot of football games. So.
I mean, you think about the plays they made in South Carolina, you think about, the block punts throughout the season, all 7 of them or 6 of them, whatever the heck that number ended up being. Yeah. I think special teams was big for them this year. And I think you saw when Notre Dame got a good special teams coach this year with Brian Mason, it was like, oh, okay, we can do some stuff from a special teams perspective. Even Brandon Joseph, who's not the greatest athlete of all time, Sean, he averaged 10 yards per punt return. And that was like, for Notre Dame fans, it's like, wow, Notre Dame returned a punt. That's wild, man. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Yes. I didn't know we were allowed to do that. Oh, man. But yeah, it's, yeah. I agree, though. I think if you can get a really good special teams coach, you get a really good special teams coach.
I think the benefit is I think Brian Mason truly impacted the roster, impacted the young men, and impacted the program with special teams to whereas now it is an expectation. Like I talked to some of the guys in the 23 class when they were getting ready to show up on campus, and they were excited about the opportunity to get on the field in special teams because they saw how impactful special teams was, right? So it's like before you even get a chance to start or get in the rotation, it's like, I get to play special teams
right.
at Notre Dame. And that is a culture change and culture shift because I don't know if the vibe was like that before Brian Mason got there. And when, I remember his introductory press conference when he pretty much was like, yo, the starters are going to play
right
on special teams. Like, this is just something that you just let walk on. Who was that? The Texas A&M? Like, you
12th man. Yeah.
Their entire special teams used to be walk-ons.
Yeah.
And then when R.C. Slocum got there, he said, hold on, we're going to change that.
Scholarship athletes all there, man. Let's get some scholarship athletes out there.
And we'll save one spot for a walk-on every year. And, so – yeah, your best players should play on special teams. It's like that for the best teams.
So true, man. So true. And we got used to some bad special teams for a few years there. So it was very nice to get a little bit of a comment in the right direction, man. Yeah, for sure. Sean, I'm going to have you answer this one here. We had from Tyler Eric, who said, is Notre Dame still going after Brandon Davis Swain?
I don't believe so. I think it was a mutual parting of ways. How can I say this? Once again, you get into recruiting and you have a lot of people around these young people where if they had the opportunity to make a decision on their own based upon what most people should decide where they go to college based upon these factors, he's probably still being recruited by Notre Dame, right? You start, involving, the views of his father, who I've spoken to several times, which I don't think he was over the top happy when Brandon committed at the blue and gold game last year. I think he kind of allowed it because that's what he wanted to do in the moment. And I think he was the one pushing for more visits. And that's what parents do, right? I think when CJ Carr wanted to commit, his dad, kind of counseled him like, man, wait a minute, maybe we should take some more visits. And ultimately, CJ, it was his decision. And I think sometimes, you don't have young men that understand that at the end of the day, they have so much respect for the people in their lives. They don't understand that ultimately it's their decision. where they want to go to school. So no,
Yeah.
I said all of that to say, nah, that's a wrap.
Yep, that one's dead. That one's dead,
Yeah.
to put it as nicely as we possibly can. Yes. So, interesting player though, Sean. I look forward to seeing what happens with him, but we'll shall see.
I will
Wait,
be
this
shocked if
question.
he ends up in Colorado.
Yeah, man. He seems like the type of guy that would be very appealed to that, right? Yeah, I could see that one. From Reed Sadaway, who said, Ryan, any current or former player comparisons for Cameron Clark? I have one, Sean. Want to hear if you have one as well, or at least a reaction to mine. He reminds me of Ovi Agofu, which I liked Ovi, man. And Ovi started at Texas. He's probably going to start at LSU this year. Kind of a lighter built pass rusher who was actually a linebacker originally when he came in. Yeah. And I think Ovi had some talent. I think Cameron Clark has talent.
That's a really good comp. I can ride with that. I was sad to see Ovi transfer. I thought, man, once he went to Texas, you saw him get better. You saw him making plays. And like you said, he's going to start at LSU this year. But that's a really good comp. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, from a stand-up rusher, like good athlete, like, yeah. Maybe not a perfect fit into either spot, but can do a little bit of everything. Like, there's a lot there. Archer 452 says, mailbag, with all the outside the octagon issues aside, is John Jones the best fighter in combat sports history?
Man. I mean, it's hard to...
My immediate thought was yes. But now I'm thinking about it a little more to see if I fully agree with that or not. I mean, that was my immediacy.
See, when everything first started, right, like at the infancy of everything, I was a huge Royce Gracie fan.
Okay.
Like, because he would just grapple and put you in all of these submission holes. I'm like, yo, like, this dude is not big, but he just finds a way to take these dudes down. And then I started getting into the McGregors and St. Pierre's and strikers. John Jones is just everything, man. He really is. I wouldn't be mad at anyone that argued that he's the GOAT. I wouldn't be mad. I understand if you have someone else that you would like to put up against him, but I wouldn't be mad if someone wanted to argue that.
Yeah. Archer, like, honestly, I might need to sit on this one and think a little bit longer. Because again, like, my immediate response is yes, but like, I don't think I've ever really thought about it that much. So I think this might be one that we might need to revisit in the future. Good question, though.
Impressive win Saturday night, though. I can tell you that.
Yes, certainly was. Certainly was. Lance Rivers asks, I know Peyton Woodyard is a commitment to Georgia, but I thought that I read that Notre Dame is still pushing for him. Is there anything new on him? Lance, no. I mean, like, this is where we are, man. Notre Dame's going to continue to recruit Peyton Woodyard because Peyton Woodyard's a really good football player. But I think that Peyton's one of those kids, if you like got to know him, Peyton's one of those dudes that like he's very consistent with his commitments that he makes, right? Like, I don't think he rushed a decision there. I don't think that he made a brash decision, anything like that. I think that Peyton made a decision that he thinks is best for him. And I think that he's going to stick to it. I really do. I mean, things could change always in the recruiting world, but I really think that Peyton is very happy with his commitment to Georgia. That being said, though, Notre Dame's going to keep recruiting him. Like, they're going to keep calling, and they're going to keep texting, and they're going to keep doing all their stuff because, he's open. At least, he answers the phone, I should say, right? Like, I'm not saying he's open in his recruitment, just that he answers. So until he doesn't, they're going to keep recruiting him because he's a very talented football player. So hopefully that answers that question. Wait, question from Archer 452, mailbag for Ryan. Who was the best quarterback and best wide receiver you saw at the combine, and why were they CJ Stroud and Jackson Smith and Jigba? Well, I mean, Archer, of everybody that worked out, I mean, CJ Stroud did have the best day as a thrower. I mean, like, it was considerable as well. Like, I thought there was some good stuff that Will Levis did, although inconsistent. I thought Anthony Richardson obviously blew the place up from a testing perspective, and there were some really good throws he made, but like, you saw the inconsistency, But CJ Stroud was consistent as far as his approach, his drops, ball placement, all that great stuff. CJ was really good in that day. Wide receiver wise, I mean, Jackson Smith-Njigba was really smooth through the drills. He tested really well in the short shuttle and the 3-cone, like at a historical level. He tested to that degree. I would say Joshua Downs also had a great day. You know, he ran 4.48 out of North Carolina, but his explosive numbers were really good outside of that. And then he was also another kid that I thought was incredibly smooth through the gauntlet and through the routes and all that great stuff. So, I mean, Jackson Smith-Njigba from an on-field perspective, as far as the on-field drills, was definitely at least top 2 or 3 wide receivers there for sure. CJ Stroud was the best thrower at the combine this year because obviously Bryce didn't throw, so you don't know what it would have looked like comparative. But yeah, CJ was very impressive. There's no doubt. We had another question from Timeout Tom, who says, I know Notre Dame was trending poorly with Peyton Pierce. Has anything changed? I haven't heard about Kennedy Urlacher lately. Is there any update? So Tom, so Peyton Pierce stuff, it's still a little bit of a to be determined. It's just about like how much impact Max Bola and Al Golden can have over the next, several weeks here. Like that'll be a big indicator as far as like if they can keep the momentum, because obviously the momentum did stall and decrease with the loss of James Laurinaitis. So that was still a little bit of a to be determined type of thing. He just got done wrestling about a week ago, so things are going to start ramping back up with his recruitment. For the Kennedy Urlacher thing, he has a visit obviously scheduled for April. I mean, I'll put it like this, man. I think if Notre Dame pushes very hard, which I expect them to push hard for him, I think that Notre Dame has a very good chance to get Kennedy Urlacher into the class. I think that the family really likes Notre Dame. They're very receptive, obviously, to that conversation. I think Kennedy also is very intrigued by Notre Dame. He's never been there, though. But I think when he gets on campus, Sean, that could really speak volumes for Kennedy Urlacher. I think that could really move the needle for him, and I think Notre Dame is going to be hard to beat in that one overall, personally.
I think his dad would love it.
Yeah. Being a guy that played in Chicago for so many years, right? Like,
I think his dad would love it.
Yeah. Yep. I think so too, man. I really do. So I think they're in a good shot with Kennedy Urlacher. Good spot with Kennedy Urlacher if they need to recover with Peyton Pierce, and we'll see. Here is a question from Stephen Doty, who said, is this visit – oh, sorry, we already answered that earlier. Yes, it was an unofficial visit for Cameron Clark. My apologies. Sean, here's one for you. Jason Smith says, how is Justin Scott's basketball season going? I know, Sean, I know you've been out to a couple of his basketball games already.
Yeah, was that his game Friday? They beat their arch rival, Fenwick. Blew them out, actually, late in the game. Because they had played a really close game earlier in the season, and Fenwick was looking for revenge. Tonight, they are in the Elite Eight. Tonight is the Super Sectional. If you're out in the western suburbs, it's at Now Arena out there at Hoffman Estates. They play Grays Lake, who was a pretty good team. They're 29-5, but the competition they play out in that area is okay. So this would be the second consecutive trip downstate for Justin Scott and St. Ignatius. And more than likely his last opportunity to win a state championship in basketball, because more than likely he's going to early enroll wherever he goes. So, yes, tonight, 7 o'clock, they play Grays Lake, and I fully expect that they'll win another game. And, Justin is steady. They really have gotten better over the season as a team because of the growth of Phoenix Gill, who was a sophomore shooting guard / point guard and the son of Kendall Gill. He has really taken a major step forward.
Kendall Gill's got a son, huh? Does he?
Yeah, he's really taken a major step forward for that team and has been averaging close to like 18 points a game in the playoffs. So
is he a shooter like his dad? Because Kendall could shoot now.
Combo guard.
Okay.
Because he plays the point for them. He's combo guard, and he's gotten so much better at running the offense, getting them involved, being a coach on the floor. You can just see his growth, right? And he comes from he's been around basketball his whole life.
Yeah.
His dad is Kendall Gill. So just reps. You see the more he plays, the better he gets. And that's really been kind of like the stimulus for them the second half of the season to go on this run that they've gone on.
Well, best of luck to Justin
Tonight
Scott
at 7:00. Yep.
So Sean, this could be his last basketball game ever if they lose. Like ever.
Could.
That's wild. It's
Yeah.
wild, man. Early enrollees, man. That's wild. We had a question from Stephen Doty, or it looks like more of a comment here. Said, love how Michael Mayer didn't win on the underwear Olympics and the weird reactions. Goes to show how playing football is a different thing. Hope he gets the right fit where he can be used to his full potential. Agree, Stephen. I would also say this. People always ask me what's the best fit for Michael Mayer as a team, and I'm just like, any team that throws the football is the best fit for Michael Mayer, man. Like, he's that good. He really is. So, yeah, I think it's going to be just fine. Just fine. Sean, we had Nathan Milton said, Ryan, is Isaiah Foskey really stiff or medium? Medium stiff? That's funny.
Is he light starch?
Is he light starch? That's funny. It's really funny. Nathan, I don't think he's super stiff, though, to your question, right? Like, he's not, like, unbearable, can't bend, can't change direction. It's just not a strength, right? Like, he's an okay change of direction guy. He's got okay hips, but there is a little bit of tightness there, right? Like, it's not – there are some pass rushers where you're like, man, that guy cannot bend at all. Like, that is a pure – linear player. There's no bend in those hips at all. I think Isaiah has some bend in his hips. It's just that it's not a strength of his. So I hope that makes sense. So I guess medium. I guess medium stiffness. I don't know.
I at no point, and I'm sorry, Notre Dame fans, at no point would I take Isaiah Foskey over Will Anderson. I don't care what defense I'm playing.
Yeah.
He's just a better player. He just is. And I know Brian kind of specified, I think Friday, that he would take him if it was this certain type of defense. Give me the better football player.
No doubt.
Just give me the better football player.
No doubt about that. We also had Stephen Doty, who said lots of comments about Isaiah Foskey from the Senior Bowl about his lack of a plan. Is the word on the street that this is fixable and a result of Notre Dame coaching, or is it an issue going forward? I don't think it's a result of Notre Dame coaching. I just want to kill that, right? Like, I just don't think that's the fact there. I believe that it is fixable, one, and I think that people are pretty open to that because it's nothing tangible, right? Like, it's something physical. It's a mental processing thing. Like, you need to kind of get that plan in your mind and be able to use it.
Yeah.
So it's fixable. Is it going to be an issue going forward? I have no idea. That's up to Isaiah, right? Like, that's up to him whether he wants to really enact and to grow. But it is fixable, Stephen. Absolutely. We had a mailbag from DMND13 who said, do you think Mayer is the first tight end drafted? What are the odds Kincaid gets drafted before Mayer? I still believe that Michael Mayer will be the first tight end drafted, Sean. But I think it's a little more up in the air than what I thought it would have been when the draft process started. Like, I honestly, it could be Kincaid. It could be Washington. But I would say Mayer's still the favorite to be the first tight end drafted. Like, that's just where I am with it.
He won't.
You don't think so? He won't be?
No.
If he isn't, it's so bad.
I look at the history of the GMs in the NFL. Half of them are competent and half of them are dumb.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. And the dumb ones are usually up top with the higher picks. And they're the ones that are going to pass on Michael Mayer and outthink themselves.
It does happen a lot, man. It does happen a lot. So
it
you might be right, Sean.
It happens every year. They're literally talking about Anthony Richardson being a top 5 pick. A top 5 pick.
Yeah, it might happen.
See? A top 5 pick at 54% completion percentage. That's insane.
It would be, I think, one of the 5 worst career completion percentage ever drafted. You know this, Sean. Of all first-round quarterbacks ever, who had the lowest completion percentage in their college career? This is a great one. Great trivia question.
Repeat that.
Of all the quarterbacks drafted in the first round historically in the NFL draft, who had the lowest college completion percentage? I'll give you one hint. It was below 48%. It's like 47 point something percent.
Wow.
Yeah, man. Great trivia question, man. People in the chat can guess this one too. It is, I saw this one. I was like, oh, wow, that's crazy. some funny names. No, John Elway is not one. JP Lossman's, I think, completion percentage was significantly higher. RG3, I think, actually had a nice completion percentage, if I remember
He was
correctly.
like close to 70, right?
Maybe not quite 70. RG3's was 67.1. You're pretty close, Sean. Like, that's a high completion percentage. So to rephrase the question, I'm talking about college completion percentage. College completion percentage. What's that?
Rick Meyer? Because Rick Meyer was pretty bad in 1990.
No, was it Rick Meyer?
Hmm.
Oh, someone just got in the chat.
Oh, Kyle Bowler? Oh, wow.
Kyle Bowler, who at Cal had a 47.8% completion percentage, Sean. His highest ever was his senior year where it was only 53.4.
Wow. Wow.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Just wild, man. Absolutely wild. But yeah. But he could throw the ball hard, just like Will Levis. Yeah. Anyway, good job, Jay. Jay, you get a sticker, man. You get a sticker, or email Brian and ask if you can get a free mug or something, man. I don't know. I can't help you in that department, though. But you can try. You could try. From Ant VR, Sean, Ant_VR says, Nolan Smith's 40 time is great, but doesn't production matter? The guy had 12.5 sacks and 20 tackles for loss over 4 years. Production should matter. I mean, well, all right, let me rephrase. Production does matter, Ant, but people lose their minds for upside sometimes. They lose their minds. Absolutely. And I'll put it like this, though. Raw stats sometimes aren't a great indicator of impact either. I'm looking at a guy right here that is a multiple-time All-Pro, Sean, that during his college career had 17 tackles for loss and 11.5 sacks. Do you know who that is?
Nope.
That's TJ Watt. He's one.
He did not have good.
Yeah, and he did not have a ton of college production. Here's another one. Here's a defensive end that has been to multiple Pro Bowls that had 21 tackles for loss in his career and had 4.5 sacks. 4.5 in his college career. It's a good one, man. I got all the trivia stuff today, man. I got it working.
You stumped me. Who?
It's Danielle Hunter. 4.5 sacks at LSU. 4.5 sacks at LSU. So,
I would have never guessed Danielle Hunter.
Yep. And he turned out to be a really good football player.
And look, first of all, Nolan Smith missed a full season. Like,
he did.
Relax. Those stats probably would have been like 20 and 30 tackles for loss if he played this year. So let's not act like he wasn't a productive player when he played early at Georgia. Early. So
yeah. And Nolan Smith is a good football player. He hasn't been incredibly productive as far as like his sack numbers, but like he's been a really good run defender during his career.
Definitely a very good run defender. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, let's roll through a couple more of these. We're going to get out of here because I do got to go pick up the daughter today. From Stephen Doty, does Brandon Joseph have the mentality to be a 5, 6, 7 and special teams warrior? So round 5, 6, 7 and a special team warrior. I would say this, Sean. There's no mentality with a 5, 6, 7, right? Like that's where you get drafted. I don't think that you go, they're like, I'm a 5th round pick, man. It's my mindset. No one has that mindset. Can he be a special teams warrior? I don't know, Steven. I don't know. He's not a consistent tackler. So that's not great. He also isn't incredibly fast. So like, is he a guy that you want to run down on kickoffs? I don't know. I don't know. Look, I'm hopeful for Brandon Joseph, man, because I still think there's some good tape out there, but it's a clouded vision right now, man. It's a very clouded vision. We had another combine question, Sean, that said, Eric O'Brien said, how was Tyson Bagent during the combine? So he's the quarterback out of Shepherd. He actually tested really well, Eric. Better than I thought he would. He was rated like the 4.7s, man. I was like, really?
Yeah.
Huh.
His dad was there cheering him on. It was pretty cool.
Oh, one of my buddies in the media side, Sean. He had a fun because his dad is a arm wrestling champion or whatever. Yeah. He had an arm wrestling competition with him on scene at Indianapolis, which was pretty funny. But
nice. I didn't see his stories like that. I love seeing stories like that.
It's a great story, man. Sean, he was actually about to transfer out of Shepherd his final year too before the season to level up in the competition and everything. Decided to stay at Shepherd, man, and did well with the program that wanted him, obviously, coming out of high school. So great story like that.
Good for him.
I think he's a talented thrower, tested better than I thought. It's just, man, that step up's going to be pretty big. He's going to get drafted late, most likely. Can he acclimate to the NFL speed? That's big. And we'll see. But Eric, I thought he did well for himself at the combine. I thought he had a solid performance.
I agree.
Sean, we had a question from Call Me Ty who said, mailbag, which group would you pick for Notre Dame? You can either have Ryan Wingo, Aeneas Williams, Jaden Riddell, or Cam Williams, Carter Nelson, Corey Smith. Which trio is better?
Well, I'm rocking with my boy Cam Williams. Once you put Cam Williams in there, it was over.
Yeah. I think I would opt for that second one as well, because I would probably go for the second one as well, Sean, because like you said, Cam Williams is a dog, right? Carter Nelson, everybody knows I'm a big fan of Carter Nelson. Corey Smith would be great. I would love Corey Smith in Notre Dame, but Corey Smith's not coming to Notre Dame. That's just kind of where that one is at this point. I would say the more realistic one is number one, though. Like, that's much more realistic than number two, because I just don't think Corey Smith's going to come to Notre Dame. So that one's dead. But, I mean, you can't go wrong either way, in my opinion. Either way is very good. It's just, you know what's crazy, Sean? At the end of the day, when we get to the final rankings, all that great stuff, we're going to have a legitimate conversation on who's better, Ryan Wingo or Cam Williams. We're going to have that conversation, man. And when he committed to Notre Dame, nobody would have had that conversation. It would have been Ryan Wingo, Cam Williams down here a little bit. Cam's junior year was wildly good, man. Phenomenal junior year.
Yep.
I love Cam, man. He's a good football player. Then we go to this is a funny one, Sean. Wayne Miller just said, didn't the Raiders take a speedy wide receiver over Michael Crabtree? They did. They drafted Darius Hayward-Bay out of Maryland that year over Michael Crabtree. Crabtree, of course, ended up being a good NFL wide receiver. Darius Hayward-Bay did not.
He was good. Yeah.
Yeah. Michael Crabtree, do I remember him in was it him and Richard Sherman, right? Got into it in the end zone where Richard Sherman stole his chain and threw it or whatever.
That was crazy, right?
Yeah. Absolutely crazy. Here's a pretty general one, Sean. I think there was another question about this. Yeah, we'll get that one in a second. Bailey Brad asks, thoughts on Anthony Richardson? Do you have thoughts on Anthony Richardson, Sean? I have a lot of thoughts on Anthony Richardson, actually.
You can give your thoughts.
If Anthony Richardson ends up in a perfect situation, I think he could be a superstar, man. I really do. I mean, that kid is an incredible athlete. He's got a live arm. It's just he hasn't played enough football. I really wish he would have went back to school. I really do. He just hasn't played enough football. He's very inconsistent in his approach because he hasn't had live bullets a ton. But in the right system, I think that he could be really good. I really do. But the problem is that if he doesn't land in the right system, he could also be very bad, right? There's a chasm between his upside and his floor. He's an incredibly low floor prospect. So this is an ultimate boomer bust kid. He's an ultimate boomer bust kid. I can buy into the hype, but I can also buy into the hype by also saying, but he probably wouldn't be a guy that I would bet my job on, right? Like that's kind of tough for me, Sean. It's kind of tough for me.
Yeah, I agree with that. For me, it's all about where you go, right? Man. If let's just say he drops and the Ravens take him, right? And they franchise Lamar for 2 seasons. And then eventually let Lamar go. Anthony Richardson has been there for 2 years, just in the background. It's the same system. Like it's literally the perfect system and coaching staff to be able to transition him into the NFL. But it's definitely going to take the right coaching staff that has a vision for a talent like him.
He's definitely not a fit transcendent player, right?
No.
Like Trevor Lawrence, you could have dropped Trevor Lawrence into any situation and he would have gotten out on the other side, in my opinion, right?
Yeah.
Like you could have dropped him into Jacksonville with Urban Meyer as his head coach and he could have figured it out like he's figuring it out now. Most quarterbacks, if they dropped into that type of situation, they would crumble and then their confidence would be shot forever. Like most guys would be that way. Not every player is like that. Not every player has that fortitude on top of the talents aspect of everything, right? And I don't know if Richardson does or not. I just know that there's a little bit of a long distance between the ceiling and the floor. A little bit of a long distance there. Want to bring this one up, Sean, because we don't know the answer to this one, but it's fun. Jay Henry said, what happens if Blake Fisher returns and Billy Schroff turns into a guy? Do you put them on the same side? Could you imagine that nastiness, Sean, on one side? That would be fun. That would be really fun.
But he would fit, well, his personality would probably fit better next to Joe Alt, because that would be more like a Quentin Nelson, Mike McGlinchey vibe. Because Blake is nasty. Now, if you watch Blake in the second half of the season, watch him in the Gator Bowl. Man.
He looked good, man. He looked good. I'm interested to see, Sean, too, how NFL teams view Blake Fisher. Because I think a lot will say, like, oh, he can play offensive tackle. But I think there's some dude that'll be like, that guy could be an all-pro at guard. Like an all-pro at guard. Yeah. Or he could be a good tackle. That's where the outweighing happens. It's like, do you want a good tackle or do you want a all-pro type of guard? I mean.
Hey, they pay guards now in the NFL.
They do.
So, hey.
Yeah. I mean, and I would like Notre Dame to start. It would be awesome if they start this, like that trend that we've seen at Alabama over the last few years where it's like left tackle leaves, the right tackle who's a stud moves over to left tackle now, right? Like it would be cool to see if Blake could play left tackle. I would, or it would be great if both of them come back for another year after this year, like they're fourth year guys. That would be wild. But If Joe Alt has a season like he just had again, Sean, or better, just find it hard to believe he doesn't come out of the draft, man. Just find it very hard to believe. But
I don't know, man.
Man, Sean, he just had a great year, man. He's gonna be a top 10 pick if he has another year like he just had.
We've seen it happen at Notre Dame. We've seen
it
happen.
I know.
We've seen
but
it
like
happen.
Mike McGlinchey would have been like a late first-round pick if he came out the year before, though.
Ronnie was top 10.
Maybe.
Ronnie would have been top 15.
Maybe.
Come out.
You might be right about that one. All right, let's get on to – we only have like 3 more left, Sean. So Archer said Anthony Richardson got the maximum athleticism score at the Combine. The other top scores from quarterback all-time, RG3, Tyree Jackson, who's now a tight end in the NFL, Trevor Knight, Oklahoma Trevor Knight, Tyrod Taylor. That my guess is he has a similar career. I guess my question would be a similar career to who? Because like there's a little bit of different outcomes in that group, isn't there, Sean? It's like RG3 flamed out because of the injury, and he was just never the same guy after the good first year. Tyree Jackson never played quarterback in the NFL. He's a tight end now. Trevor Knight never played in the NFL. And then Tyrod Taylor had a pretty successful career for his talent level, in my opinion. So
I guess Arch is feeling good because an Ohio State quarterback is finally about to break through.
Maybe. We'll see.
He's probably feeling good. But no, I would push back because I think the game is changing. I've told people all the time, Jalen Hurts making it to the Super Bowl changed a lot of things. That was the best thing for Anthony Richardson coming out, in my opinion. It was the best thing for Justin Fields. It's like if you put talent around quarterbacks that are dual threats and you can coach, once again, operative word, if you know how to coach with the talent around them and give them an offensive line, you can be successful.
Yeah.
You can be successful. And I don't think anyone they thought Cam Newton was an anomaly. Ryan, remember when Cam was on fire? He made it to the Super Bowl and lost. Everybody was like, see, and he never got back. It's an anomaly. Well, here's another anomaly. Years later, and guess what? There are other anomalies coming behind him.
It's going to start to become a trend. It's not an
Yes.
anomaly anymore,
Yeah.
right? The exception is it's turning less of an exception and now becoming not the rule because it's still not standard, right? But it's becoming more and more prevalent, I think is the best way to put it. So to your point. All right. Moving on now to Brandon Plesner, who says, mailbag, is this new wide receiver target from Georgia a take? Canyon, I just don't see it on film with him. Brandon, I would disagree slightly with the film part. I actually do see it on film with him. I just don't think that he has played a position enough. Right? Like he's a very talented kid, though. Is he a take right now? Probably not. I mean, I don't know. I think it's way too early to tell that at this point. This is now about, you're getting in with a kid that I think has a high upside. Continue to see how he continues to develop and takes a step forward. I hope for Warner Robbins, I hope he plays wide receiver all year because I think we'll get a really nice indication of just how good he can be. So that's kind of what, that's kind of where we are right now. Like and this is just my speculation. I haven't asked the Notre Dame staff this or anything, right? But if Isaiah Canyon wanted to commit today, I'm not sure they would take his commitment. That's just my opinion, though, because there's just other really talented receivers on the board. But that could change if he develops the way he can develop. I think that could change eventually. So we'll see. We had a Bent Notre Dame who said, "Mailbag, can you try and rank the wide receiver and defensive end board? It's hard to figure out who the staff is pushing for the hardest. It is hard. So look for." I'll put it like this. All right. I'll put it like this. Who I think is near the top of the board for each, Sean, and we'll just work through this real quick. I think at wide receiver, it's a pretty big group still because you have Cam Williams and you're trying to find a couple studs to go with the already stud that you have in the class. So I think they're going to push for guys like Ryan Wingo, Jeremiah McClellan, Jason Robinson, Micah Gilbert out of North Carolina is, I think, a kid that Notre Dame really likes, Josiah Brown. I think that's like the top of the top group, but I think they're still on guys like Quasi Gilmer, Emmett Mosley, Breedell Richardson. I think they're still on that group, but I think there's kind of been a priority type of look from the wide receiver. So I would say, again, Ryan Wingo, Jeremiah McClellan, Jason Robinson, Josiah Brown, Micah Gilbert. I think that's kind of the top of the group, but then Quasi Gilmer, Emmett Mosley, and Breedell Richardson are guys that they like and that they're still pushing for. So that's kind of wide receiver. Defensive lineman, I think interior defensive lineman for me, Sean, Notre Dame, Justin Scott's the priority, right? Like he's numero uno one. I think after that, you're talking about Jared Smith from, the Smith twins out there in the New England area. I think that he is a priority for Notre Dame. I think he's a guy that Notre Dame really likes, that they're high on. I think David Pale out of Pennsylvania is a kid to keep an eye on. And I think TJ Lindsey's a guy to keep an eye on. That's kind of the defensive tackle board. Defensive end is a little bit more of a cluster right now. I think Bryce Young is an absolute priority for them. I think Jacob Smith is a priority for them. I think Anelu Lafayette out of, and I probably butchered his last name, I apologize, Anelu, if you're listening, but he's out of the state of Hawaii, a player that they like. He's out of St. Louis, which is the same one as Jordan Botelho and Nick Herbig came out a few years ago. So that's the top of the top, I think, but then they're still on guys like Malachi Williams out of Pennsylvania. They're still out of Kellen Lindstrom out of Missouri. Cameron Clark was a guy that we just talked about in this show. Darian Mayo is a guy that they're on. Cole Mullins is a guy they're on. Logan Thomas is a guy that they're on out of the state of Texas. So that's kind of what the boards look like. It's just figuring out the rest of the hierarchy. But I do think that there's some guys that are already conceived as priority players for Notre Dame.
And did you mention the Pele kid?
Pele, yep.
Yep. Pele. He is, if you can get him and Justin Scott in the same class.
It's a lot of beef, man. That's a lot of athletic beef, too. That's a lot of athleticism, man. A lot of athleticism.
Man, I would do a full hour show on why Al Washington is the best.
Sean, that's a great combination, man, because I feel like you can have a legitimate argument of who's the one, who's the nose in that group, and who's the three tech, and you wouldn't be wrong. You wouldn't be wrong. You'd just be like, yeah, both those guys can move, and both those guys are massive in different ways. So that's a good one, man. We had Archer said, does Derek Carr make the Saints the favorites in the NFC South? If you were Carolina's GM, what would you do at quarterback this offseason?
Can I answer this one?
Yes. Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. Yes.
At this point, yes, because the Saints are the only ones that have a legit quarterback right now. So at this moment, yes, I would make them the favorites.
Yeah, because Tampa Bay has Kyle Trask. Carolina is right now has Sam Darnold. And then who's the last team in that division? I'm blanking on. Why am I blanking?
The Falcons have. They just got rid of Mariota.
So Desmond Ritter's their guy right now.
Yeah.
So maybe. Maybe.
The second part.
Yeah.
He should give the Chicago Bears whatever they want to come up and get the number 1 pick. That's what the Carolina GM do. Give us your first this year, your first next year, your second next year. Heck, we'll take your second this year. Like whatever Ryan Poles wants, just give it to him, right? If you guys need a quarterback, just give it to him. That's what you should do. Just give it to him. Whatever he wants.
Whatever they, yeah, sure.
I'm not being biased at all.
I'll let y'all handle that one, man. Sure. We'll go with that. Michael Campbell, we got 2 questions left. Michael Campbell said, what happened with cornerback Caleb Beasley? Are we flipping soon or no? Man, we have no idea if he's going to flip, Michael. I mean, at this point, I'll say this. He's obviously coming in for a visit, which is big for Notre Dame. That's big time. I think that Caleb Beasley really likes Notre Dame. Is it enough to get him away from Tennessee? We'll see. We'll see at the end of the day. But, yeah.
We'll let Tennessee do that to themselves during the season.
If they implode, yeah, or they don't do as well.
Don't worry.
And then the last question we had was from Derek Colmer, who just said, Ryan, how many NFL teams did you meet with for their scout positions, and why did you turn them down? Derek, it's actually funny, man. I've never told the story really to anyone. This is kind of like a little bit of an inside background stuff. So I actually, 2019, I was at the scouting combine, actually, and I actually did talk to a general manager about potentially a scouting position for a team. That did happen. But I didn't pursue it. I didn't pursue like a second interview or anything because I was, just starting the family thing, right? And honestly, at this point, Derek, like if a team called me today and offered me a scouting position or like a DPP position or, director of scouting position, I wouldn't do it. Because you're on the dude, especially if you're an area scout, you're on the road 180 days of the year, man. Like you are. Mm-hmm. I love my family and I intend to be around them as much as possible. So, I had scouting dreams when I was younger and that's all well and good, but I don't have those scouting dreams anymore. Like it's just not where I am in my life anymore, man. Like I like the media side of things. I like covering the NFL draft from the media side. I do pretty well with my evaluations. If I do say so myself, I do well historically, but that's way past me. I'm comfortable where I am now. So that's
a lot.
Yep.
That's a lot. Like I know some scouts. That's a lot. Some guys just love it though, Ryan. They just love. I'm talking about they're lifers, man. Now they have families. They've been doing it for 30 years.
Dude, I used to do a podcast with a gentleman named David Turner, who was a scout for literally 30 years. Yeah. Sean, he's like in his 50s now, and he loves it, man. Mm-hmm. He's got 2 kids and everything, and they just are okay with him being on the road, 880 days a year. And the crazy part is that my wife would support me 100% if that's what I wanted to do. But I don't want to be away from them that long. Right. I just don't want to be away, Like I want to be there. I don't want I'm good where I am at, man. I'm good where I am. But great question, Derek. I've had some opportunities in that field, and I like where I am. So that's a good way to end us, though, for the mailbag portion of today's show. We want to thank everybody so much for tuning in today. Before you leave, if you could please just hit that like button. Subscribe to the podcast, notification bell, all that great stuff. Go sign up at boards@irishbreakdown.com. We'll be having more and more intel on the recruiting side of things, as well as spring football is coming up soon. So we'll have some more intel on that side as well. So from Sean, I am Ryan. I want to thank you all again for joining the Notre Dame Recruiting Hour on the Irish Breakdown podcast.